I'd like to now call to order the regular meeting of the Fairfax Town Council for December 2018. And with that, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance to begin. Okay, and Madam Clerk, if you could take a roll call.
Councilmember Goddard.
Here.
Vice Mayor Kohler.
Here.
Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Ackerman.
Here.
Mayor Lax.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And our first item is to approval of agenda and affidavit of posting. And does anyone have any suggestions for modifying the agenda?
No, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda
I'll
and the
second that.
affidavit of posting.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. We did meet in closed session earlier. Before this, it was a conference with legal counsel to discuss anticipated litigation, and we have nothing to report out of session. So a couple of our sort of standing rules on protocol. The mayor's job is to maintain order at the meetings. The council and the audience are expected to refrain from using profane language and or ridiculing character or motives of staff, town council, or other members of the public, and to maintain tolerance and civility at all times. Please turn off all your cellular devices at this time or place them in silent mode. We will review the agenda at 10 p.m. to ascertain which items, if any, should be continued to another meeting. Any matter that we don't start by 11:30 p.m. will be continued or adjourned to a regular council meeting unless we vote to suspend that rule. And some announcements. We have a request for proposals to fill out one of three, we have 3 artists in residence positions, each for a 2-year term. It's open to all types of artists: poetry, dance, sculpture, acting, music, etc. The program seeks to bring the creative experience to the residents of Fairfax. You can visit our town website for the request for proposals and more information, and our website is townoffairfax.org.
Mr. Mayor, can I just add a little more information right now?
Please.
That RFP closed on Tuesday evening at 5. So we are not accepting any more proposals at this time.
Okay, very good. I stand corrected.
Thank you. I included it because it was being mailed out on Friday, the agenda, and people would see it.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry.
Okay, this Saturday, December 8th, the Fairfax Craft Fair at the Pavilion from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., sponsored by the Fairfax Recreation. And we'll have a wreath making and caroling and potluck on Sunday, December 9th, from 2 to 5 p.m. at the Women's Club, sponsored by the Fairfax Volunteers. So a lot going on this weekend
Mayor,
at the Pavilion.
Mayor, may I just boldly assert that the Fairfax Craft Fair originated as the Sustainable Fairfax Craft Fair, and we are very happy and proud that both organizations work together to continue to host and sponsor the Fairfax Craft Fair, for the record.
Great, thank you. And credit where credit is due, definitely. We do have some vacancies on our boards and commissions. We do have an open slot on the Fairfax Open Space Committee. One of our members is moving out of town, so that will be opening up very soon. We have, I think, 2 or 3 or 4 more on the Climate Action Committee. We do have a few openings for the Climate Action Committee. We have 3 openings for our Tree Committee and 2 terms on the Planning Commission will be expiring at the end of this year, and applications are available now at Town Hall and on the town website, and you can also contact our town clerk, Michelle Gardner, for more information. So if you're interested in serving on the Planning Commission, do get an application, and soon we'll be holding interviews for that early next year. Also, because of the holidays, our next town council regular meeting will happen a little later. It'll be on Wednesday, January 16th. So it'll be the 3rd Wednesday of the month. And finally, the Fairfax Food Pantry, as always, is open this Saturday from 9 to 11 a.m. at the Fairfax Community Church. And the address is 2938 Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. And as always, volunteers are always needed, so very worthwhile event to support. And so now we come to our regular agenda, and the first item is adopt a resolution reciting the fact of the special election held on November 6, 2018, and declaring the result and such other matters as provided by law. And Michelle, if you could lead our staff report.
I think the town manager will, but I will say that in your supplement, there is the resolution. We were waiting for we consolidate our elections, our local elections with the county, and the county registrar had to certify the results of that election. So that's attached to the resolution that is in the supplement on the dais that I left you, and there's a copy for the public out in the lobby.
Okay, thank you. And Garrett, then, do you want to give us a discussion on the
Actually, I think
resolution?
the town clerk's better suited to report on this item.
Oh, I can keep going.
Okay.
So we had an election on our local Measure O, which is the continuation of the tax that supports the paramedic authority in the Ross Valley. And it needed a 2/3 majority to pass, and it did pass with 77%, more than 77%. And we had obviously no candidates on the ballot. That was it.
Very good. And does anyone from the public care to speak on this item? Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the town council for discussion and or a motion.
I move adoption of this worthwhile thing. Here I go. I borrow these glasses, so I'm trying to focus here. I'll move adoption of resolution 18, next in line, of the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax, reciting the fact of the general election held November 6, 2018, declaring the result and such matters as provided by law.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, and then our next item is reorganization of the town council, selection of mayor and vice mayor. And again, Michelle.
Okay, so this is the time when the office of mayor is rolled over to the next person on the town council. As a matter of practice, the vice mayor usually takes that post, but you guys get to select. And then you choose from one of your number who will be the next vice mayor. Usually, we like to have someone who has been on the council at least a year, or who is the last, next in line to serve. How do I put this in the staff report? You know what I mean. The one who hasn't been mayor in the longest time becomes vice mayor, if there's not a newer person.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to move Barbara be our next mayor. Sorry, Barbara Kohler.
Okay, I think we may need to have some public input if there's
Oh,
any.
you're right. You're right. Sorry.
Well, thank you. I mean, obviously we need public input, but I would also like to suggest that just as we did when Renee and I were first on the council, we were rolled over for a while before we became vice mayor, and just as Peter, when he was on the council, we waited a while. I would suggest that Renee should be the vice mayor, but obviously we need public comment.
Okay, very good. So is anyone from the public care to speak on this item? Okay, doesn't look like anyone wants to speak to that, so we'll bring it back to the council for discussion and action. And yeah, any other comments or?
I could stand by my earlier, or read my earlier motion. Yeah, or I'd like to move Barbara Kohler to be our next mayor of the town council.
Okay,
And there's not a special words I gotta say on that one, right?
and then do we have a second?
Do we have,
Yeah, I'll second that.
That's a singular motion. And you've seconded.
So I'd like to make a motion that Renee Goddard be the vice mayor.
Okay, let's work on the first motion first, I guess. So we have a motion for Barbara to be appointed mayor and a second, is that correct? Or Bruce seconded that? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, and then we have another motion. Oh, that's right, Barbara made a motion
A
to,
motion to have Renee be the next vice mayor.
well, how long have you been on?
It's exactly a year.
Exactly 1 year. Yeah, because I personally, I feel that Bruce could probably do the job. But we have, yeah,
Well, I think what we did.
because he's been on the planning commission and been chair of
So
a number of things.
Peter
So-
was on the planning commission for 8 years, and when Peter was on the council for about a year, we waited an extra year, so it seems like, and then with Renee and I, we waited, Larry and David, we all waited, so it seems like that sets up kind of the way
Okay.
it should go, and everybody gets more seasoning.
Seasoning is good.
Well, I suppose I should weigh in. That's a surprise to me, but it sounds okay. I will point out that that would mean that my term will expire before, I mean, it would only be if I were reelected, and if I ran for reelection and were reelected, that I would have a chance to go into being the mayor. So that would mean if I were to become vice mayor next year, let's say, then that would, whether I became the mayor of the following year, would be contingent on being reelected. That's probably happened before where people have crossed over like that. But I realize it's a certain amount more work, so I'm willing to wait and see what happens. But yeah, I think I could do it either way. Yeah, I'll second it. I am assuming that you want to take the job.
okay, well, that's very magnanimous of you, Bruce. And so we have a
Yeah.
motion.
And,
Oh,
okay.
go
yeah,
ahead.
Go ahead. No, I don't need,
Okay, so motion and a second, all in favor?
aye.
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 Okay, so then that passes. So Barbara will take over as mayor and Renee as vice mayor. And that's, I guess, my officially last act as mayor. And it's been a great year. I've really enjoyed it and look forward to passing the baton.
Well, before you pass the baton, I'd like to present to you a plaque as Mayor Peter Lax for 2018 in appreciation of your leadership to the town of Fairfax. And I think this will resonate with you. Don't Tell Me This Town Ain't Got No Heart by R. Hunter and Jay Garcia.
Excellent. A quote from Shakedown Street by the Grateful Dead. Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right, are we taking a picture?
Okay.
Come on. I will say I had to have Mimi Newton sing that song to me because I didn't know it.
Yeah.
Wait. Good enough.
Anything?
Thank you.
Okay, great. And with that, we'll take a brief break for refreshments.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So just so people are aware where we are, we're finishing up our break, and we're going to start on open time for public expression. This is to address the council on matters not listed on the agenda. Please approach the podium and state your name and address if you feel comfortable doing so. You have up to 3 minutes to speak and 5 minutes if representing a group. The council is not permitted to take action, and state law strictly limits the right of the council to discuss any unagendized item unless it can be demonstrated to be of an emergency nature or the need to take immediate action arose after the posting of the agenda. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Ling?
Ling Xianbel, 63 Dominga. So I still wanted to comment on the lights at night. They are really too bright, and I think it's not a healthy situation. It's not good for people at nighttime when they walk around that the lights would be so bright. Yellow is a much better color for night, for lighting. In France, the headlights on the cars used to be yellow for a long time, and then unfortunately with Europe they had to go back to white. But it's totally fine. Yellow you can really see very well, and it's much more gentle for the eyes. So these new lights, they've been here for maybe a few years now or something. And I don't know if either changing the light bulbs to yellow or putting a yellow cover or something, but I think it's important. I think it's too bright and it's not good. And the other thing is I would like to discuss an item that's on the consent calendars, consent agenda, or so I'm not exactly sure what the procedure is for this.
Well, when we do the consent calendar, we'll
Yeah.
ask if anybody would like to comment on an item on the consent calendar, so not yet.
So when it's that time, then I can ask. Okay, so then that's it then. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to make a comment just informationally. I have been working along with Bruce here, making different shields right at the corner of Scenic and Sequoia is a prototype that I've been working on, a shade that is more yellow in color. It's kind of orange. That one's a
really?
bit orange. And that's the
great.
prototype version 1, and then there's probably going to be
So
another
you can put
prototype
those
or two.
on
Yeah, take a look at
others? Yeah.
that light. It's right on the corner of Scenic and Sequoia, right where that intersection. There's a light there with
With
it's
a
like a
yellow
little
thing?
cowl around it. So from the sides, it looks yellow, amber,
And that's a
and
cover
from straight
that you
down,
put,
it's the
And
LED
so you
color.
you added that onto the light? It's
Yes.
oh yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
we're
a good
just seeing
move.
how that
Yeah.
works and what the
All
angle
right.
is right, and
Yeah.
so it's a work
Yeah.
in progress.
All
but
right, very good. Thank
but-
you. Yeah.
Thank you, John.
Informationally, yeah.
Okay, Richard.
Good evening, Council. Richard Applebaum, 61 Woodland. So I've been really pleased with all of the foment around our town in the last year around fire stuff, and I know there's been a lot of information and education, and I know that in my brief chats with the Chief of Marin and Chief of Ross Valley that they have obviously procedures, but I'm still concerned that we don't have a specific plans or procedures here, and given what just happened recently with the fires up in Butte, if we can come up with, I mean, I know there are limits to what we can do. We live in a very rural, nature area, and we have, narrow streets and limited arteries. But if we could have something that the town could review, just some sense of something, maybe there's some buses somewhere, or there's some people are going to show up at certain intersections, but it would be really great if we could have something, some Fairfax plan of some sort. In that same vein, I know that it's been made very clear that, the whole topic about closing Bolinas has been put to rest. But I think it would be very comforting for the townsfolk if we heard that, particularly given what's happened recently with people getting caught in cars, that we could just hear something from council that there's not going to be any changes to Broadway and Bolinas, and we're not going to have bulb outs, we're not going to change a lane and reroute traffic, because I think we've all seen firsthand in a small town like ours with a few roads that fire vehicles and emergency vehicles can pass through. So I think that would be comforting. And the last thing I wanted to mention, because I've just discovered this week in all my activities around the 5G stuff, is one of the leading scientists and experts in the world is a guy named Dr. Martin Pall. And he's written some books and articles, and his articles have been referenced by other scientists to the multiple hundreds. And he discovered that exposure to 3G and 4G and eventually 5G towers, it has an effect on plants, and it changes something in their cellular activities such that they produce a substance called terpene. And this terpene on the plants has basically the effect of putting like a thin layer of gasoline. And so I'm curious and suspicious that we're going to hear, because I know that some of these areas that have had the big fire problems had a lot of the 3G and 4G cell towers in there. So in the vein of this theme of fire, I just think it's important for everyone to kind of get familiar with this, look into it, read up on it, because it may turn out that it's a very, very big factor in how some of these fires have just gone crazy. And we know there's climate stuff going on as well, but I freaked out when I heard that there's a thin layer of something analogous to gasoline on top of plants that comes from being near these towers. So that's my theme for tonight, fire safety. And again, it'd be great to hear that we're not going to narrow any of our important roads.
So
Thank you.
just to clarify, Richard, when I was mayor in 2015, I convened the Disaster Council and we updated our emergency plan. One of the things I've asked, and it hasn't been done, and I'd like it to be done now, is that our emergency plan go on the website now that we have a new website. And there also are maps in that. One of the goals I have for this year is that we look again at the Disaster Council and we start looking at, can we do something a little more down to earth as well? So thank you for your comments. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
actually the emergency plan is on the police department portion of our new website.
Okay, I don't believe the maps are up though, and that's
Okay.
also from fire. So let's see if we can get those up.
Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Hi there.
Okay, Helen Foss, 120 Scenic, on the same theme. I'm representing the Manor Hill Firewise Committee. We're approximately 500 homes going up Scenic Hill. And we're concerned, and I would say even scared, after witnessing the tragedies in Paradise and the car fire and Santa Rosa. And we've been told to expect more and more severe fires even because of the drought and global warming. We're also told that measures can be taken to mitigate the dangers to our homes and lives. And we urge you, the committee, the council, to agendize fire and to spend more monies than the token amount now budgeted for related issues. Specifically, we propose 4 things. Number 1, enforcing the town ordinance 8.24.010 to 030, and it reads in part, all rubbish, weeds, dry brush, dry grass, and other rank growth, and all trimmings and cuttings thereof, or of trees, all dead trees and all bushes, which are in such state or condition to become a fire menace because of the dryness, or which are otherwise dangerous as a fire menace, shall be abated, herein provided. So we have an ordinance. San Rafael enforces their ordinance. They have one person, a fireman, it doesn't have to be a fireman, who goes around and spends the whole year making sure that homeowners and property owners abate nuisances. And he works with the homeowners and you know, they have a really, really good program, and there's no reason Fairfax couldn't have that. But we would need to spend the money to do it. The second thing is that we could allot funds for roadside clearance. That's the growth that's beside the road, which in a fire can cause the road to be blocked by a fire that's leaping from one side to the other. So roadside clearance was part of our Chipper Day efforts some years ago. So that can be done by tree companies. The third thing would be to instruct the town staff to apply for grants to do some of this. Grants from CAL FIRE or from the feds for monies that they both agencies have said are allocated for these purposes. Let's see, the fourth one, well, in addition would be trail clearance, so that in case people have to ditch their cars and get out very quickly, as they did in Paradise, they can come down the trails. We don't have the trails open. So the last one would be to hire an additional firefighter, because 3 should be on duty to operate an engine, a fire engine, at all times. And this is something that Todd Lando, who's our representative from the county, from the Ross Valley Fire Department, said that we should urge the council to hire an additional firefighter, because 2 on an engine can't adequately address a fire. So you need 3 people. Anyway, we realize that money's been budgeted for the coming year, but we feel this is important enough to revisit the budgeting priorities and really seriously address fire, because we've got these neighborhood groups, but we can't do much. We really can't. We really need some muscle behind it and some money, which council could do if you could implement some of these suggestions.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Mayor, if I could respond to a couple things. So Helen, one of the things, we did budget funds for fire inspections to begin in the coming year in 2019. That's something that I want to implement through the Ross Valley Fire Department, is to actually have firefighters go out and inspect properties and basically cite people for violations of those codes.
One of the problems with that is, though, that they need 2 people on duty, 2 firemen on duty at all times down here.
Right, and the plan is to hire additional seasonal firefighters to do that
Okay,
before
that
the
would be
fire
good.
season begins. So that's one thing.
Right, we need that.
And then there are discussions, I think, of hiring additional fire staff. But that's a
Right.
function of the Ross Valley Fire District. And John Reed and I both serve as the representatives for Fairfax, as well as San Anselmo, Ross, and Sleepy Hollow. So, and that board meets the second Tuesday of, or I'm sorry, the third, no,
Second
second
Wednesday.
Wednesday of the month.
A week after this council meeting,
So if-
generally.
If you wanted to address fire concerns directly to the fire board, that would be the time and place. And we generally meet at the San Anselmo Fire Department at 6:30.
Did you say it was January? Because the meeting in December is canceled.
That's right. Yeah, our next meeting will be January, I believe, the 9th? January 9th. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Valerie?
Hi, Valerie Hood, 79 Dominga Avenue, Fairfax. I just wanted to make the announcement, the next 5G hearing in Fairfax will be at the Planning Commission for all the people watching on TV tonight, December 20th, to cover their recommendations and changes in favor of a stronger ordinance to town staff. I would like to thank the Planning Commission, if they happen to be watching tonight, for their profound understanding of the threats to our health and safety from 5G microwave cell towers, for their clear instruction to staff on the changes they want to see in amending the ordinance put before them last week, incorporating citizen recommendations, and for publicly acknowledging the hard work and dedication that we put into our presentations. The final agenda and staff reports for the Planning Commission on the 20th meeting will be published at the end of next week, so please join us on the 20th. On December 3rd, at the San Rafael 5G hearing, after several hours of thoughtful discussion, it was agreed that their 2 council-member telecommunications subcommittee will work this week to incorporate into their urgency ordinance and resolution at least some of the recommendations made by the public. An encouraging development was a statement made by Councilman John Gamblin that until the health effects are known, he is interested in adopting the strictest rules possible. He stated, if we're going to push it, then let's push it as far as we can. That council will consider their urgency ordinance on December 17th, at which time the public may speak again. We had nearly 100 people there to speak. A second strong showing will bring home the seriousness of our intention to resist the 5G rollout. The San Rafael Council, the Fairfax Council, and other Marin towns and cities, as well as the Board of Supervisors, need to understand that we are not going away, that this is of immense importance to local residents, and that we will not give in to fear and coercion from telecoms and their attorneys. And that we need strong political resolution and solutions in favor of our health and welfare above the needs of corporate profits and the incursion of a toxic technology into our public spaces. I ask again tonight that the town of Fairfax reach out to all other jurisdictions in Marin, including the Marin County Board of Supervisors, to join our considerable financial and human resources to fight off the telecoms. Please do not let them continue to try to pick us off one by one, town by town across Marin. Thank you. One last thing I wanted to say is that we're now finding many doctors who are joining our fight. Michelle Perro from the GMO fight has joined us, and she sent a really strong letter. She has a second one that's much stronger than the first she sent. Dr. Jacqueline Chan of Larkspur has joined us. We had a doctor here tonight that came that passed out a letter to you all, and we will continue to do that. We're also considering putting together a Marin County healthcare forum just to get the doctors involved, so they will start to come to the meetings, make the statements, take the time. It's becoming the number of towns and cities that are joining our fight against the 5G rollout is amazing. We now have senators that are coming out against it, demanding that the FCC upgrade the regulations that are woefully behind the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We can hold on the applause, please. Okay, Jody.
Good evening, Town Council. Jody Timms, your representative to the Marin County Commission on Aging with my little monthly report. So the commission does meet tomorrow in Novato at 10 o'clock with a legislative update for 2019 with California Senator Mike McGuire at the Marin Valley Mobile Country Club. Before I mention some other items, I just wanted to also say that I've mentioned before one of the current initiatives of the Commission on Aging is addressing ageism. And in case you're looking for an example of internalized ageism, you might think about whether or not you were or are as excited about turning 50, 60, or 70 as you were about turning 16, 18, or 21. Age discrimination is really insidious, but just listening to people talking, you can sometimes hear really good examples of how we collectively devalue aging. For instance, I was at a gathering earlier this week when one person shared that they had just turned 70. They didn't seem particularly upset about that to me, but another group member very quickly said, "Don't worry, 70 is the new 40. I'm 65, and I'm such a different human being than I was at 35. I am much more personally, I think, interesting, resourceful, and experienced, and a much more creative and innovative person in general. So the older we get, the more we have to offer, not less. And no one wants to be discriminated against because of their age or their ability or any other factor. We all want to be treated fairly. So just notice when others or even you yourself may fail to value your age and the amount of time you've spent on the planet. So that's my little talk for the night. In terms of a few more events, the commission is hosting a junior accessory dwelling unit expo on February 7th, so not till next year. I brought a couple flyers. They haven't actually been printed, but these are straight off the press. So for folks who are listening who are thinking, maybe I want to take that extra bedroom and consider turning it into a J-do, there'll be a lot of information at this expo that homeowners could go and learn more about it. So I'll leave those there. Our age-friendly forum this month at the library will be December 21st, which is the third Friday rather than the fourth because of the holiday. The title is Handling Life's Emotional Ups and Downs, Enjoying and Feeling at Ease with Life, and also experiencing loneliness and depression are common at all ages. So I want to invite people to come out and have a conversation with us. We'll have a clinical therapist there, Lori Rifkin, to help us consider making the most of all of our emotions and feelings and our experiences at all ages in life. On December 14th, the libraries will be hosting again the new support and discussion group called Live and Learn. So we will again be looking at what's challenging us, what motivates us, what inspires us as we share stories of our lives. So I'd love to see people come out for that. December 19th will be Breakfast with Friends at the Fairfax, which is our once-a-month hour breakfast. So come join us for coffee and a chat if you'd like. And then we also have all the flyers in the back with all of our other events that are happening. So that's it.
Thank you, Jody. Chris.
Council members, staff, and fellow Fairfaxians, my name is Christopher Lang. I live on Canyon Road. I'm operating under some constraints this evening. Number one, my own mental and physical ability to stay here much longer. And number two, the constraints on open time. The reason I'm here is because I'm very interested in the parkade redevelopment, and so I'm not able to address it directly because it's on the agenda. And so I've come up with an idea that I think is a viable one, and it's mostly about green infrastructure. So as you know, in the past, Fairfax has not been able to truly exploit, develop, install green infrastructure per se in Fairfax projects. Yes, the Good Earth was required to, but other places like the pavilion parking lot and such, it didn't happen. And so my idea is that understanding the parkade project and looking at it for over a decade now, it seems like there's a possibility there to do I'm not going to recommend specific details for that project because I'm not supposed to talk about it.
So, Chris, the parkade is agendized.
I understand this. What I'm trying to explain to you. I'm not going
to
specifically comment on it, but I think the town could develop a policy of the council directing staff, finance director, planning director, and town manager to apply for grants from Flood Control District 9 to install boilerplate green infrastructure in every single project the town does. So it could be used to retrofit part of the parkade parking lot. It could be used for future projects such as the parkade. When streets get repaved, such as Mono Lane or whatever that little street is over there, there's ways that certain permeable infrastructure can be installed instead of simply grinding and repaving. And this is a floodplain, this entire area. So the idea is if there's any kind of shortfall in a project, it may be possible to get extra money from flood control to put in green infrastructure, which is mostly permeable paving, and in my opinion, permeable pavers installed around tree wells, because tree planting in downtown is somewhat neglected in my opinion. And so for redevelopment of town properties in general, especially the mono lot, the one that goes uphill by Gestalt House, that one really needs some tree wells put in. So my suggestion is, as a policy, the council directs staff to have a toolbox like we had on the Fairfax Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan, a toolbox of different techniques of infrastructure, nuts and bolts and details that could be implemented on a project-by-project basis, not just blanket use, but so at least staff has some guidance as to what actually should be done and a way to get some extra money for the town of Fairfax. Because I'm going to conclude now by thinking town of Fairfax is kind of missing out on grants from the flood control district. San Anselmo has gotten 2 or 3, and it's about medians and infrastructure and permeability and stuff like that. So I think it's really important for our future infrastructure that we have some kind of policy that, so that staff knows that council wants this stuff. I understand you had a conversation about permeable paving for some project, and it wasn't cost effective.
So
That's
Chris,
fine.
could you wrap it up? You're going over the 3 minutes, or
So
you're
the
already over.
Bottom line is tree wells and incremental portions of infrastructure for all projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's
Mayor,
not
if you-
comment.
Actually, I'd like to correct some of the impression that just came from the
Okay,
last speaker.
go ahead.
In that at the pavilion lot, there is green infrastructure there that sinks, I mean, we got over an inch of rain in a 24-hour period, and no net runoff from that escaped from the green infrastructure on the pavilion lot. And I'm not going to speak to the parkade one, but it's a part of the plan for, feeding the trees there. I did, Councilmember Goddard and I both went over that and looked at that part. And Barbara and I are the liaison mostly for the parkade, but I'm not going to speak to the parkade that's on the agenda. But I'm saying, as a general policy, that already tends to exist, and we look for that wherever we can. And, there's a difference between permeable pavement and green infrastructure. Permeable pavement was cost prohibitive, and but we could sink the water and feed the trees, which is what we're doing.
Thank you, John. Wendy.
Hi, I'm Wendy, and I live in Fairfax. I just wanted to report that yesterday at the Board of Supervisors, the first reading happened for a just cause ordinance in the unincorporated areas of Marin County, and they've passed a 2-year trial period of doing that. And I know that you've heard me talk about renters' rights issues for a long time now, and I just want to encourage that if the county is starting to pass those kinds of laws, that I really hope that Fairfax considers a just cause ordinance also. And unfortunately, the ordinance that just passed that's passing with the county only applies to 3 units and more. And personally, I would like to see that be enacted. If we do it in Fairfax, I would like to see it for every rental unit. And then the other thing I wanted to say is tomorrow at the Board of Supervisors, the Truth Act Forum is happening, and I want to encourage everybody to attend if you care about our immigrant population in Marin County and issues with ICE and the sheriff. So there's a rally at 4 o'clock at the post office, and in the Board of Supervisors chambers at 5:30, the Truth Act Forum is happening, and I just encourage people to attend that and speak or support others who are speaking. Thanks.
So just to clarify, so I'm on the county steering committee for the assessment of fair housing, and it was our group with a community advisory group that recommended that the county undertake the just cause. We picked one thing, and luckily they are finally moving forward on that. But one of the things we wanted to do, and I've been pushing for, is to have the county bear the administrative costs for more than just unincorporated, because small cities have a difficult time dealing with that. So it's a good thing that they're moving forward. It's not everything that everybody could have hoped, but at least they're taking a step. Thank you.
It's something that's way past due, and it's something is better than nothing at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. Mallory?
Hi, Mallory Guyton, Willow Avenue. I am following up on 2 things, the straws and the dog park. What's going on with both of them, please?
So
I'll give you a quick, if I
Renee
could.
is working on, maybe just go ahead quickly on that.
Yes, so the council had approved that ex-mayor and myself be a smaller subcommittee, and being the Zero Waste Committee, and we were meeting on Monday. I spent the day at a single-use plastics foodware policy makers forum today in Foster City all day, learning what other jurisdictions have done all over the region. I'm very hopeful that we will start making progress as soon as we meet on Monday. Dog park, please keep your eyes open for places.
I did.
I have spent time with our town manager,
did.
looked at the backboard, billboard
Yeah,
area at the ball field. There's no access. There's no ADA access to that spot. I'm not going to go into it. We can talk, but please keep your eyes open. Ask other people who are interested in this where they might be willing or have seen a place that could work. It does have to be accessible.
Okay. And can we do anything with Marin Sanitary to get them to be able to compost the compostable plastic that's not compostable here? Is there any way we can talk to them about that?
It has nothing to do with them.
Well, they don't have a facility to do that. Can they
Right.
get a facility to do that?
I
Can
think
we-
they're not compostable, that's the problem.
The short answer is that no. But it is a very long discussion.
But
which
it
at the
is
appropriate time, I would be very.
So I
very happy to
suggest that
have.
you take this offline and meet at another time, because as far as the straw issue, it's not a simple issue, and we're trying to look at this holistically. And so maybe you guys can talk offline. Renee is the expert on compost and recyclables.
Okay, I just want to say one more thing. I know it's not compostable, but there is, I think, up north, there is a facility that does that that just deals with those corn utensils. They have a way to redo those. If they're not compostable, yes, but there is a way to deal with them. And maybe we can talk, or somebody there could talk to Marin Sanitary about getting a facility, a part of their facility to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else for open time? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council, and we'll move on to the consent calendar. Does anybody on the council have a question on something on the consent calendar, or do you feel strongly about pulling something from the consent calendar?
I would like
Renee?
to spend a couple of moments on item number 13, and not in the form of pulling it, but something that I would like to read.
Okay, well, we can do that separately. Anybody else have a question? I have a couple of comments, which I can make if nobody else. Okay, well, just a couple things. So one thing is on item 10, the purchasing policy. I had recalled that we had adopted a green purchasing policy, and I wanted to make sure that this administrative purchasing policy wrapped in the fact that we have a green purchasing policy that I worked on as part of the Climate Action Committee and as a council member. So we have a supplement on our dais that's also out front that just adds a whereas that reminds people about the environmental purchasing and practices policy. So I just wanted to make sure that didn't get lost in the shuffle. It's kind of your supplement to agenda item 10. Agenda item 10, I think you're looking at 18, Bruce. And it's just a whereas. And then the other thing I'd like to mention is on the item 9, which is the joint exercise of powers agreement, the agreement calls for 1 elected official and 1 staff person. The staff report mentions 2. And I think that ultimately when we talk about committee assignments, one of those folks will become the alternate to this because there can't be 2. So we'll do that in January, so we don't need to do that now. And then this last thing is item 11, approving the contract with Majora and Gelati. One of the things the staff report mentions that by doing this work that we hadn't contemplated, it would remove certain things from our pavement plan, and I would very much like that to be something we take up at the mid-year budget so that we don't defer those other items. We get those wrapped into this budget. And I think staff pointed out, Garrett, you pointed out that the staff report just wasn't clear, but that was the original intention. So the plan is we would continue on course with that pavement plan, and at the mid-year budget, we would add additional money so that we wouldn't lose any of those items. Is that correct?
Sure, we'd have an update of what we spent it on and what we need to do the other projects.
Okay, thank you. And that's all I had. So with that, did any member of the public want to comment on a consent item?
Do I say my name again? Ling Xian, 63 Dominga. So it's item number 8, the hiring a consulting agency,
Right.
not to exceed $25,000 for just for going over the rates, the garbage rates. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, we do this every 3 years, and these folks save us a lot of money by their analysis. Is typically Marin Sanitary asks for a certain amount, and by them doing all the analysis, they're able to come back with a lesser amount. And so this is money well spent.
So it's the is it the rate that we're paying, like the monthly rate for the garbage? Is that what
And
you're talking about?
they look at the rates over time. They look at how they're charging to make sure that what the, I'm sorry, I'm yelling. It's hard to use these new mics.
Yeah.
Is they're doing a reality check on what's being asked. So they look at how they're charging, Marin Sanitary is charging, what their ask is, how they're building that, and typically this consulting group comes back to us recommending a lower rate, which we're able to agree to. Not always, but so they do an analysis that we can't do in-house.
I see, and then it's a bargain, and then you bargain. You say, you ask them to lower the rate after?
Yes, and
after
they
that?
do.
Ah.
So it's something that
Yeah.
it goes to our zero waste committee, and then
Yeah.
they go, and so it's very helpful. It
Okay.
does save us money and save people in the town money.
Okay, all right. It just seemed like a lot of money to spend on something.
It's
but
actually
I
not a
guess-
lot when you consider what we save.
Yeah, all right.
And we
Okay,
make
so-
sure we're doing our due diligence.
Uh-huh. All right.
Having gone through the negotiations a couple times, it's invaluable. It is very complex. It's sort of like having your own lawyer or your own expert at the table. And it's also paid for as part of the franchise agreement. So it's kind of built into the cost of the overall service. And it's invaluable because these rates are just so complicated. It's almost impossible to be able to evaluate it without that kind of assistance. So I echo Barbara's comment that it is really money well spent, and it does end up saving us money in the long run.
Because they overcharge, like you feel like they're overcharging the.
Well, it's
sanitary?
complicated, and it's the only way you can really know what's fair is to really be able to drill down into the numbers. And you know, Marin Sanitary, they might have a different view of how these costs should be allocated, and it is extremely helpful, and it's saved us money in the past, and
Right.
it's a very good investment.
Okay, because as you know, there's a lot of things that we need to spend money on, so that's why I was.
No, sure,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I actually had the same question today, so I'm convinced that it's the right thing to do. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Anybody else have a comment on any of the consent calendar items? Seeing none, bringing it back to the council.
So may I,
But let's go to item 13.
13.
Sorry for yelling. I will get this one of these days.
Okay, is this a good volume?
Yeah.
Okay, so as Thanksgiving has just passed, and as I've been thinking about gratitude a lot, I've been thinking about some of the people that are struggling right now. I've been thinking about most of the people I talk to that feel as though this is a time where people are really merely coping, as I feel a lot of anger in our communities, as I look at our government, the suffering in the north of our state with the struggles people are having right now, with a friend who's very ill and has found a way to see gratitude as an antidote to some of the despair, I decided that I would write this proclamation, hoping that the council would adopt this proclamation and we would go forward in proclamation that December be Gratitude Month in the town of Fairfax. So if you will, I would like to read this proclamation. Town of Fairfax Proclamation declaring December 2018 Gratitude Month. Whereas Fairfax is blessed with an engaged and passionate community, and whereas Fairfax is filled with generous residents, merchants, artists, and restaurateurs who give to the community, and whereas we live in a time of climate chaos, devastating wildfires and floods, politics carving cavernous divides, democracy in peril, and senseless shootings of our fellow humans, and whereas to acknowledge that there is a collective fearfulness in our community is to acknowledge and name that which is our common experience. Whereas to offer gratitude as an antidote to fear and a roadmap to healing would provide a window for reconciliation and peace. And whereas gratitude and the expression of thanks is accessible to each and every one of us. And whereas, as is known to all fans of Fairfax, Fairfax is the greatest town on earth. Now, therefore, be it hereby proclaimed by the Town Council of the Town of Fairfax that December 2018 is Gratitude Month in the Town of Fairfax. And be it further proclaimed that all of us are encouraged to pause before judging, to smile before frowning, and to give before taking. And hopefully this will be signed and dated this 5th day of December 2018. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd like to entertain a motion for the consent calendar.
I'll move to approve the consent calendar
Second.
as amended by Barbara and with the proclamation as read by Renee.
Okay.
And second.
Sorry, what are you doing, Michelle?
I'm signaling you to make sure to add the supplements into the motion.
So just make sure you include,
Including the supplement as read by Renee.
okay. And so the motion was Lack, second Reed. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. So with that, we'll move on to the presentation. And I do want to say, everyone, the cookies and the treats, which look like tangerines to me, are open to anyone in the agenda, please. I mean, anyone in the audience. Sorry, I mixed up. And please help yourself. And I want to say thank you to our town attorney who cooked, I believe, the gingerbread and the chocolate chip, chocolate cookies. So please help yourselves. And everything else looks great. So with that, I would like to introduce Karen Strolia, the project manager for the Marin Mobile Care Mobile Shower Pilot Program, who's going to provide us an update and potential sites. So it's a short presentation, I'm understanding.
Yes.
Let's keep it short.
I will talk very quickly.
Well, we want to understand, but
It's relatively short, yes.
okay,
Yes.
let's go then.
Okay,
Thank
all
you,
right.
Karen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's nice to see all of you again, and I too will try to gauge my vocal distance here. So just a refresher, Marin Mobile Care is a mobile shower program. It came to life earlier this year in March, and really the initiative was looking through the lens of employment. I'm with Downtown Streets team, and we're helping folks who are experiencing homelessness get out of that experience, back into employment and back into housing. And so when we're working with people boots on the ground, and we see folks who are invited to have job interviews or landlord interviews, but they don't feel dignified enough to go meet with these potential opportunities, then it's really easy for us to go, how can we help someone feel dignified? a shower seems like the first step. So we did outreach throughout the county. We looked at what the need was and realized that there was not enough service available. There's currently one brick and mortar public shower available at Ritter Center in San Rafael. So anybody who's in Sausalito, Novato, West Marin, they have a really hard time accessing that one shower point because of monetary resources or other obligations. It takes a lot of time to take a bus. So the real goal really was to meet people where they are and to offer this basic need. So fast forward a little bit, we got some financial support from Marin Community Foundation, and those dollars were allowed us to be able to purchase 2 units. Each of those units have 3 stalls. 2 of those stalls are the regular stalls. 1 of those stalls in each of the units is a California ADA compliant, so that allows us to host folks with any physical disabilities. It also allows us to host families. There's currently no public facility available for anyone under the age of 18. So this is kind of broadened our bandwidth to be able to service community members. Like I said, Downtown Streets team is an employment readiness platform. This opportunity also gave us the chance to hire our team members directly out of homelessness and into a job that it gave them regular pay, regular hours, so now they're our staff, which is really exciting. We were able to give them CPR, first aid, and conflict management training, so any conflicts that happen on the shower sites, they were able to squash those. If there's any need, we've got incredible relationships with our community partners like the fire department and the police, but we felt it was important to train our staff themselves. We also, I should speak on this too, of course, we secured additional funding through the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members, and this is a subcommittee, the community homeless group. Basically each community, each city is paying a percentage into a larger pot of dollars that goes towards something that is homeless specific. Historically, that's covered the REST program, the Rotating Emergency Shelter program. Last year that retired. This year those dollars went toward our mobile shower unit. So that the dollars from the council members and mayors is actually covering our operating costs. That allows us to get to each of these sites. We launched in early March, like I said, and we initially launched 2 sites in Novato and 1 site in San Rafael. The first month we had no guests at one of our Novato sites, so we put that site on hold and we were only hosting in San Rafael and in Novato. We were then able to secure an evening shift in San Rafael, so that allowed us to connect with community members that were maybe working but still living in their vehicles, still needed a shower, things like that. It offered us more opportunities to serve folks. When our shower staff is not hosting showers, they're out in the community doing outreach. So they're going into encampments, they're going into libraries, they're going into businesses, they're going to the Bay in Sausalito. They're really trying to find folks that need showers. They're talking to different community partners, getting the word out that these showers can come to them, how to get to them, what bus routes to take. We've got business cards with all that information to help disseminate. So we're really trying to do this whole county effort of getting folks to our units. And of course the objectives are listed. We want to reconnect folks not just to a basic need, but also there are folks who are living off the grid. So how can we get them reconnected to services? There are a plethora of services in our county. A lot of folks are out there, they don't know about them, they don't know how to access them, they don't know what that looks like. Our shower staff is actually getting them reconnected to those services. We are a part of the coordinated entry system, so our guests are filling out surveys, and that is allowing us to get to know who our guests are. Are they a veteran? Are they over the age of 65? How long have they been in the experience? Has it been 10 years? Has it been 10 months? What does that look like? Do they have any medical needs that need immediate attention? This is giving us a larger snapshot of what that person's experience looks like. Like I said, we're able to meet people where they are, and of course, dignity. I think something that majority of us in this room take for granted is a shower and the opportunity to take one every morning. But I can tell you the first thing I do when I come back from camping at Samuel P. for 5 days is jump in a hot shower. So imagine when you're out there and you don't have that ability. This is definitely a respite for those who don't have the option to take a shower on a regular basis. A lot of folks like data, a lot of folks like narrative. I threw both of them in here just to cover all of my bases. I'm going to break this down for you very, very quickly. The first 3 columns are really like capacity utilization. This is the, what can we actually host at these sites that we're at. You'll see that we're running a little under 50% capacity. Part of that is that folks are still learning about the services. Part of that is the weather is pretty tumultuous. It's cold. People don't want to come out to go to a shower. They're tucked in. They're warm in their encampments. So this is a snapshot. This slide here is a snapshot of November. There's definitely been a ramp-up period to get us to where we are. We've seen some fluctuation in numbers because of the weather, like I said, but as of today, we've served 1,587 showers in the community, which has been incredibly exciting. Column number 2 there is the average number of daily showers per site. Column number 3 is the number of unique individuals at each site and the number of showers hosted at each site. So while we can say we've hosted 1,587 showers, that does not mean that we've hosted 1,587 unique individuals. Some people take 3 showers a week, like a lot of us in this room. The last 4 columns, those are really about surveys. It's a snapshot of the connection to the greater services. So I mentioned our surveys that we've got the HMIS, that stands for Homeless Management Information System. That's giving us an idea of who's out there in the experience, who do we need to get back into housing. The VI SPDAT, it's an acronym. The first 2, Vulnerability Index. The last 5 don't really make a whole bunch of difference, because really what that is we're looking at someone's vulnerability. We're looking at someone, are they a female, are they a male? Do they have HIV? What's their trauma look like? Are they struggling with substances? Are they struggling with domestic violence? It's really a larger snapshot, but it's a really intimate survey. So you'll see the percentages there. The number of folks who we're serving have participated in those surveys, and the number of those surveys that have been given to our guests at our showers. So it's the impact directly at our showers. Something that can't be tracked through a survey, and I'll get to this, is there is an even greater service of care that we're offering to our folks, and that is the connection. A lot of folks are pretty lonely when they're in the experience, and we've seen, since we've been out there as long as we have at this point, that even if someone's getting housed, they're still coming back and checking in with their people. They still want to see what their crew is doing. They have a shower available through coordinated entry. They've been housed, but they still want to come and see what their community is doing. So it's definitely something worth making note of. Excuse me. There we go. So the 3 C's, this is the elephant in the room. Everybody wants to know, well, what kind of conflicts, chaos, controversies, challenges, what's really going on, boots on the ground? What are you guys seeing? It's really fun to talk about the successes, so let's get this out of the way. We've had 1 verbal conflict between 2 guests. That was the first week that we were out there. Those 2 have since become allies and really support each other in their experience. We had 1 person who tried to use substances in the shower. Like I mentioned before, our staff has been trained on how to handle that. That person no longer uses substances in the shower, but they still come back and they still connect with our shower staff, which is huge. They've also since asked for help with getting connected with substance abuse relief. How can they mitigate those addictions? Concerns. These are things that I've heard from other communities that I've presented to. Well, will these showers bring people who are in the experience to our community? In our experience, the answer is no. Everybody who is in that community uses that shower. We've got showers in Novato and San Rafael. You would think that that's a very natural transitory space, but the people who are living and staying in Novato are using the showers in Novato. And if they come to San Rafael, it's because they're accessing other services, medical services at Ritter, or they're going to the soup kitchen at Vinny's, but they're not going to San Rafael to access the showers. So it's really connecting folks where they are. Loitering is another concern, but what we found is that people who are hanging out at the showers are actually the ones who are building that relationship with our staff. So it's actually forced me to think of loitering in a different fashion. It's giving us the opportunity to meet with our people and to build that trust. The surveys ask really vulnerable questions. I know I would not want to answer those questions if I didn't know who Renee was. She looks really nice, but I don't know who she is. I'm not going to give her my personal information. But after I've spent some time loitering around the shower site, I know that Renee is a trustworthy person, and so I'm going to have her go through this survey with me, which is then going to connect me to these other services. So loitering is really a trust-building exercise that we have at the showers, and it's been exceptionally robust. Serving the transient population, of course, people are coming and going. We've had a couple of people who have stopped in Novato on their way through up to Seattle. Do they stay, and are they coming through and settling because of the showers? No, we haven't seen that yet. Encouraging stagnancy. That's been another thing. Will the showers allow someone to be in the mindset of, I'm going to stay in this situation because it's comfortable? No, we've actually seen people who are like, okay, now I can go to a coffee shop and fill out resumes. How do I find a job? Where's my doctor? We have somebody who I can touch on in a few minutes who has diabetes, a horrible wound in his leg. The showers have not made him stagnant. The showers have actually encouraged him to go see his physician on a regular basis. That wound is now 50% smaller. So it's doing the opposite of what we all want to think the showers would be doing. Set up and serve needs. I don't remember what that bullet point is, so we're going to move on. Challenges. Trust building. Like I mentioned, the loitering is really an opportunity for us to get to know the folks who are staying outside. And then the other challenge is really getting into more locations. Like I mentioned, we've been in Novato and San Rafael since the inception of our program. As of yesterday, today's Wednesday, right? As of yesterday, we hosted our first shower in Sausalito, which was very exciting. So we're now there Tuesdays and Fridays. And I'm looking to expand further come the new year. Successes. This is my favorite part. So I'm going to kind of blow through these really quickly, but one I want to kind of hang out with is that first one. So we helped one person get reunited with their family. It doesn't sound like a lot, but this one person was brought to us by one of his quote-unquote neighbors, gets him out of the car, and he says, I heard about you guys. Is this where I bring him? Yes, this is where you bring him. We get him into the shower unit after we realize that he's so incredibly fragile. He can't get out of the car himself. He needs the help with our volunteers. He needs the help with our staff. He needs the help with the guy who drove him there. He gets him into the shower. We disrobe him and realize after 7 layers of saturated clothing that his skin is missing from his waist to his knees because he's been sitting in those clothes for months on end, living under a bush. Literally. So we get him cleaned up. The driver's just mortified. I had no idea he was so ill. We get him redressed with donated clothes. We've got community members that bring us clothes. And he takes him to Marin General, where the doctor he admits him into the hospital. He's got horrible stuff going on the inside, stuff going on the outside. He's there for 2 weeks. And within that 2-week period of time, the doctors are able to connect this gentleman with his family who flew in from Mississippi. So it's one person, right? But that is a huge impact that he hasn't had anywhere else outside of these showers. So it's been this really cool point of relief for a lot of our community. We've seen 2 folks get housed through our coordinated entry. One was a 65-year-old woman with severe medical needs. She'd been living in her van for 10 years and was not connecting to any services until she hit the showers. And then I mentioned the other guy who still pops in and checks with his old crew. 4 folks have actually secured housing on their own. They have felt dignified. They've gotten tips and tricks from the staff on how to meet with a landlord and not feel too nervous and how to present well. They're still housed. 97% of our guests have sought and actually connected with different referrals in the community, whether that's medical care at Marin Community Clinics, dental care, Ritter Center, St. Vincent de Paul, whatever the case may be, they've connected and followed through with those services. And when they're not connecting with the services, our staff is checking in on them and reconnecting. How's it going? How did that interview go? How did that meeting go? Do you need help with anything? Just continuing to be that pulse for someone as a check-in. 16 folks have secured employment on their own. That's incredible. We've had tons of articles in the IJ, and they're all good articles. We've had incredible funding opportunities with different partners, and the biggest piece that I can't speak enough about is the amount of dignity we've provided to people. I've had people open the doors half naked. Oh my God, I feel beautiful. I've had folks who are like, this is amazing, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee. Little things, like I said, that we all just kind of take for granted. Lucky us, right? So goals. This is kind of a snapshot map of what we've been working on. So March we were in Novato and San Rafael. August we ended up getting the San Rafael evening site, which it was exceptionally robust during the summer months. And like I mentioned on Tuesday, we hosted in Sausalito. My goals are posted up there. I'm not going to be in Corte Madera and Larkspur by the end of December because the holidays are here. So early 2019, I realize they're in both. So, why not have a really big goal for a really long amount of time? So I'd like to actually be hosting here early next year within the first quarter. And there are steps that we can partner with and take to make that happen. But one thing I want you all to know is that we're exceptionally flexible to the needs of the community. So I'd like to further that dialogue. But these are some of the efforts I've taken. You can see that we've been approved by all of these communities. We're pending Larkspur simply because Larkspur and Corte Madera want to partner and host as a twin cities. There's a marsh behind their area, and so it's really about how can we make that a convenient site, host site for that community. And that is pretty much it. I think the one piece that I do want to leave you with, though, is that, like I mentioned, we would like to be hosting in Fairfax within the first quarter. We are an exceptionally light footprint. When I say mobile, we're literally mobile. We host for 3 hours. We're in, we're out. We bring the water with us. We take the waste when we go. We have a generator, although a double prong, just like this guy right here, plug is really convenient to just be able to plug in. The generator's a little clunky. But other than that, that's it in a nutshell. Was that fast?
That was fast. Karen, I want to say you are the most amazing person, and
Oh my gosh, thank you.
I sit on the countywide community development block grant for federal money, and you and your other advocates came, and it's very little money and it's very hard choices, but we all made a plea that we would allocate more money, and there was some allocated out of our small bit that we get for the entire county. So I'm glad we were able to do that.
Yeah.
So thank you for all your help and your work and your energy. We
thank you.
really appreciate that and what you're doing for the homeless community. And I know about a year ago I said I'd like to see you guys come to Fairfax, and Renee is our representative on the MCCMC Homeless Committee, so I'm sure she'd be happy to work with you on that. And as mayor, I'd be happy to assist if need be. But I think you do a great job, and we appreciate your enthusiasm.
I appreciate that. I can't take all of the credit. I've partnered with everyone. A lot of the service providers and my shower staff and my team have been incredible. I could not do this on my own, trust me.
So, if I may, so since you've been here before,
yeah,
and I see this approved thing next to some of the cities, and
Yeah.
I see that you've got Corte Madera and Larkspur before us, which is very upsetting. I'm just wondering, what are the next steps? What do you need from us? Because you've presented the package so perfectly,
Yeah.
and I have heard this presentation multiple times. The council has now. We're supportive.
Awesome.
What are the next steps? When can we meet? Garrett, what do you need to help get this rolling? And before anyone leaves, let's just have this dialed in.
I think all we need is to sit down with Karen at some point when they're ready to come to Fairfax, and we just pick a site. Unless, I assume the council wants to know before we do that.
Well, that's my question is, Barbara, what do you think about this approval process?
I think that you all should meet with Karen, try to pick a suitable site, which I think will be a bit of a challenge. But I think once you pick that, then I would like it to at least come as an information item to the council, because I think there will be people who want to speak on this. I'm sure that there are some people who won't be supportive, but I think most people in Fairfax will be supportive, and we want to hear from everybody. So
Yeah.
I think if you guys can get together early in the new year and find a suitable site,
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
So something that the other communities that I've partnered with so far, they've also been concerned about. Not to say that you're concerned, but one of their concerns has been getting the information out to the community. So I, in Sausalito as well as in Novato, hosted a community meeting or a Q&A where I essentially presented who DST is, what is Downtown Streets Team, what are the cultural pieces that we're bringing from our organization into our mobile shower program. What does this look like real time? What are the successes and the anecdotes that we've seen? And it really address any of the concerns. A lot of the concerns that we've heard are easily addressable. I mean, for example.
Can I just ask you,
Yeah.
is that something you did on a Saturday or an evening, or when did you do it?
I pretty much jump through any hoop because I feel the need is so important.
So when you did
I
it
will
in
do a
Larkspur-
Saturday, I could do an evening.
Okay, well, why don't you guys sort of work that
Yeah.
out, because that may be worthwhile to do. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
We
Thank you for
really
having me.
appreciate you coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thanks for all the work you do for our homeless community.
They're my people.
Hey, thanks.
with that, we're moving on to a public hearing, and that is, to organize a little bit here, item number 15, and that will be Ben Berto talking about adopting a report describing the measures taken to alleviate the conditions which led to the adoption of Ordinance number 821, moratorium on housing development in the PDD zone, and adopt an urgency interim zoning ordinance extending by 10 months. Anyway, you're going to give us an update and ask us to move forward.
Yes.
So would you give the staff report, please?
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. You will recall on November 7th last month, the town council adopted an urgency ordinance which created a 45-day moratorium on development in the planned development district, zoning district. And in order to adopt a further extension of that, the town has to be conducting further studies. And this has taken place. Those studies are described in your staff report. And therefore, staff recommends, in order to be allowed to complete those studies, that you adopt the urgency ordinance extension before you tonight, which would extend the moratorium by 10.5 months or until November 6, 2019.
Okay,
And
it says November 7, 2019, is that correct, or is it November 6?
it's a full year, so it
The
expires on
staff
the 6th.
report says November 7.
Okay, well, a year,
Okay,
a
let's,
full year.
thank you. Well, it wouldn't be a year, it's 10 months and 15 days.
Correct, but it would add cumulatively to the 45-day ordinance that's already been adopted.
I got it, thank you.
So our recommendation is that you conduct a public hearing and adopt the urgency ordinance extension with the information regarding the town's efforts to date. It is noted that the Planning Commission plans to take up further consideration of modifications in the PDD zoning district at their December 20th meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Any questions for staff of council members?
Yeah.
Renee?
Could you let us know which are the properties that are zoned PDD at this time?
There are a number of them. An example would be the St. Rita's site. There are two towards the west end of town. One is the upper portion of the Canyon Village site. There's also a site immediately to the west of that. It's an interesting, the China Village site isn't zoned PDD, but it does have a general plan designation, so it could be argued that that qualifies.
You mean Tenolima? Is that what you're talking
Correct,
about?
correct.
There's no restaurant there anymore.
The former China Village site.
But a lot of people know
so-
it's a Chinese restaurant.
China Kitchen, okay, I'm sorry. In any event, hopefully everybody understands what I'm referring to, but those are the primary sites in mind.
St. Rita's site, which part are you talking about?
The entire property is zoned PDD.
It's all on a zoning map. If you bring it up,
Right,
you can see
I
all the
just,
PDDs.
I just wanted it to be told.
Other questions of staff by council members? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Another question is, so the extension of the moratorium creates a one-year moratorium. Can it be further extended, or is that the end?
As with the cannabis ordinance, with proper justification, it could theoretically be further extended. It is anticipated that we would be able to come up with regulations in that one-year period.
Okay, so is that going to be, where does that stand in line in the Planning Commission list of priorities? The reason I'm asking is that, you know, we do have a new Senate Bill 50, which is the reorganizing of Senate Bill 827, and it's been changed in some, I think, very, very important, productive ways, but I can't imagine that we're going to be able to keep escaping the state laws and mandates as these things come into place. So I would like to encourage that the Planning Commission take this up as soon as they've done all the other really important things that they're working on.
So just one thing, though, on the legislative calendar, even though a bill's been introduced, there's a long time before anything would be signed into law if it were to be so. So many months. So we don't have to stress about that one. We've got plenty of other ones to think about.
Yeah, I'm just also very eager that we move along and look at what else we can do as funding sources dry up as we speak for any kind of creation of units to house people who are quickly losing housing in this community.
We're looking at the intention behind the state regulations, the realities that those new statutes create, working with our legal counsel to make sure that the local regulations that we adopt are consistent with those regulations. And of course, we're seeing the playing field change all the time. So I have a feeling that we'll be continuing to look at, if not PDD district regulations, other regulations in that similar vein going forward into the future.
You mean state laws? Because so far there's nothing in regulations that I'm aware of. It's statutes that have passed.
Correct.
Okay, other questions? No, so I'd like to open the public hearing. So would anybody, members of the public, like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for either further deliberation or a motion.
I will make a motion if we all good.
Go ahead.
So I would make a motion to adopt a report describing the measures taken to alleviate the conditions which led to the adoption of Ordinance Number 821, moratorium on housing development in the PDD zone, and adopt urgency interim ordinance, zoning ordinance extending by 10 months and 15 days until November 7th, 2019, a temporary moratorium on housing development projects in the Planned Development District PDD zone, Chapter 17.112 of the Fairfax Municipal Code, pending preparation of an update to the town's municipal and zoning codes exempt under CEQA pursuant to sections 15060C2, 15061B3, and 15308.
To add, introduce, and by title only and waive further reading and adopt.
Did I just read all the wrong thing?
No, you read the right thing, but you didn't say introduce by title only, waive further reading and adopt.
Thank you. Okay, so and introduce by title only, waive further reading and adopt an urgency interim.
I don't think you have to read it all again. You can just say that you've already said that.
Okay, to
part.
waive this further reading and adopt an urgency interim zoning ordinance.
Okay, do I
And
have a
I will
second?
second that entire thing.
Okay, so we have a motion by Goddard and a second by Ackerman. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? No. Okay, seeing none. Moving on. Thank you. So now we're moving on to our regular agenda. And let me organize myself a little bit. So we're moving on to the second reading of the adoption of an ordinance to permit certain medical marijuana dispensaries to conduct adult use recreational cannabis deliveries exempt from CEQA pursuant to sections, et cetera. So Garrett, would you like to do the staff report, please?
Sure. As the council, you may remember you introduced this ordinance at your November meeting. Tonight is the second reading, and if adopted, it would take effect in 30 days. Now, this ordinance, as you indicated, does allow any existing medical marijuana dispensaries operating legally as of April 3rd to also be allowed to do adult use cannabis deliveries. Permitted, and they have to be permitted to operate a medical marijuana delivery service. Anyway, there's one business currently in town that meets that standard. Oh, sorry.
Yes,
Too far
unlike
away?
me who's yelling at everybody.
No, I'm too soft. Okay, I'll do that again. Okay, so the council introduced this ordinance at your November meeting. This is your second reading. Is that better? Okay.
Much better.
And if you adopt it this evening, it'll take effect in 30 days. So what this ordinance does, it'll allow any medical marijuana dispensary in any commercial district that was operating legally as of April 3rd, 2018, and was permitted to operate a medical marijuana delivery service to operate as a permitted use, adult use cannabis business delivery. So The conditions in the ordinance, what it does is it says such a dispensary obviously needs a valid city business cannabis permit, which we'll talk about in the next two items, and has to have a valid state cannabis license authorizing them to adult use business deliveries. No adult use cannabis retail sales are permitted on the premises of the medical marijuana dispensary. The deliveries need to conform with all state laws and regulations. No adult use customers are allowed to access the delivery-only operation, the adult use. And just to note, and it also allows these type of dispensaries that are in existence as of April 3rd and meeting all those requirements is allowed to operate within the state buffer zone. So no conditional use permit is required, no changes to an existing conditional use permit is required. And actually your next two items get into more of the details as it pertains to actually the town's business cannabis permit process. But this allows the use to start with.
Okay, and thank you, Garrett. Any questions of staff by council members? Seeing none, I'll open this up to members of the public. So this is just for the idea of permitting certain medical marijuana dispensaries to conduct adult use deliveries. So there's other items that touch on more details.
Right. So I guess I'm just here to sort of introduce the Marin Alliance's gratitude to you, staff, council, and particularly to you, Mayor Kohler, for your leadership in bringing this ordinance forward. By allowing Marin Alliance to expand their customer base to include adult use consumers, the ordinance will permit the Marin Alliance to continue its foundational mission of providing compassionate medical marijuana access and services to the greater Marin community. It is the only brick and mortar dispensary in the entire county. So this will allow that part of the mission to continue, which it's really struggling with because of the change in the law. At the same time, the ordinance does address, and the ordinances do address many of the concerns expressed about dispensary operations. This ordinance will not attract more customers to the premises. Delivery regulations will address fraudulent orders by minors or others. It will continue the restriction on signage and use of products in proximity to the dispensary and ball field. And all of these things are carefully set out in the regulations 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 11, 12. There's over a dozen regulations, and I can assure you I'll do everything I can do to assist the Alliance to earn your trust and faith, assuming this goes forward. I know many of the folks in West Marin Little League, at least some of the leadership, have expressed concerns about the ordinance. And I would say to them that many of these fears were expressed at the beginning, at the founding of the Marin Alliance back in 2002, 2003. And as time went by, most of those fears dissipated. And within, I think, maybe 6, 7 years of the operation, most of the restrictions on operating hours during ball games, I think all of them were removed without opposition from West Marin Little League. And I think the same thing's going to happen here. So I just really want to say thank you again for doing this. I think the ordinances will serve the greater community by allowing them to address the adult use market. And I'll be here behind Lynette in case there's any legal questions or anything, but I really do want to express my gratitude for your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Lynette, did you want to speak?
I'm Lynette Shaw, the owner of the Marin Alliance, and I really want to thank you for expediting on this. My mission to heal people has been greatly changed by the changing landscape of the laws. The 112 delivery services that advertise they're coming to Fairfax online. And it's essential for us to keep our doors open to be able to serve the patients of our communities, and the adult use will definitely help. And I'm very proud of our track record. In 20 years, there's never been an incident with a child in the Marin Alliance. And considering that no one has ever died from any form of marijuana in 12,000 years of recorded human history, we're dealing with a safe substance that's already in use in our community, and we can get it out away from the hands of the black market dealers who are carrying much more dangerous drugs in their backpacks, and deal with the reality of today, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynette. Next speaker, please.
Good evening. My name is Deb Nelson, 37 Spruce Road, 25-year resident of Fairfax, former chairperson on volunteer board for many years. After attending numerous meetings regarding the expansion of marijuana sales here in Fairfax, I've seen that one very important element seems to be left out, and that is of public safety and the impact on our police force. To this end, I've done some research and found two very informative web pages, documents from the state of Colorado. The first I'd like to quote is titled, Colorado's Legalization of Marijuana and the Impact on Public Policy, a Practical Guide for Law Enforcement. A few major notes from this study. Marijuana legalization in Colorado has posed significant challenges for law enforcement stemming from the unanticipated consequences it has had on crime and public safety. Banking systems are unavailable to the marijuana industry, creating a dangerous level of cash. Marijuana illegal trading through the black and gray markets has not decreased. People have overdosed on the higher levels of THC, leading to potential psychotic breaks and suicide attempts. Youth use and addiction rates have increased due to ease of accessibility. The second resource is a report from the Colorado Department of Public Safety, Division of Criminal Justice, Office of Research and Statistics, and it's titled Impacts of Marijuana Legalization in Colorado. It's dated October 2018. And this report compares health and public safety statistics pre and post commercialization. A few highlights from this report. Organized crime charges that were linked to some marijuana charge increased from 31 to 119. While the total number of DUIs decreased, the prevalence of marijuana or marijuana in combination as the impairing substance increased 12 to 15%. The number of fatalities with cannabinoid only or cannabinoid in combination positive drivers increased 153%. The prevalence rates for marijuana use in the past 30 days increased 50% for young adults. Emergency department visits increased from 739 per 100,000 ED visits to 913 per 100,000 ED visits. And the number of calls to poison control mentioning human marijuana exposure increased from 45 calls to 222. At the last Planning Commission meeting, we learned that the San Francisco Public Health Department has recommended that San Francisco allow one dispensary per 15,000 people. If we were to follow this guideline, we would have half a dispensary. Yet at the last Planning Commission meeting, there were discussions to consider allowing anywhere from 3 to 9 dispensaries. What I'm asking for specifically is that we continue to slowly consider this process. Marin County already has high rates of adult binge drinking, drunk driving deaths, and drug overdose rates. Do we really want to be the first town in Marin County with a storefront? Are we prepared for the traffic, for the increase in crime?
Could you wrap it up? You've exceeded the 3 minutes.
I just have one more sentence, thank you.
Okay.
Are we prepared for the increase in crime and DUIs? Initially, I supported 2 dispensaries, but now that I've learned more, I request that we limit it to 1 and honor the 600-foot buffer zone.
Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts.
So Mallory, would you like to speak on this item? Okay, come on up.
Hi, Mallory Guidam. I wasn't going to, but now I have to. We're not the state of Colorado. We're a little town in Marin that was basically practically founded on hippies coming here and smoking dope. So I really don't think we're going to have more people smoking dope than we've had. We've had a storefront. I don't remember 3 to 9 dispensaries at the last meeting. I remember 1 to 3, and unless I'm wrong here, but we have 1. And I'm great to keep it at 1. I don't think we're going to have any more car problems, DUIs, and certainly less than we do with alcohol. This, to me, feels like when people wanted to ban alcohol, now it's back. I think it's a lot less worse getting behind the wheel in 25-mile-an-hour Fairfax than it is with marijuana, than it is with getting behind the wheel here with alcohol. We've been a community that has a lot of musicians, artists, and people who are smoking dope. And I don't think legalizing this dispensary and supporting it is going to make any difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mallory. Would any other members of the public like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council for further deliberation and possible motion. So would any members of the council like to speak? Peter?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm opposed to this in the next couple of items. Again, I think it's a poor policy to sort of craft an ordinance around an existing business to favor an existing business, and I think it's kind of skewed our ordinance process around cannabis retail, adult retail, and adult delivery. So I just wanted to just reiterate my concerns with that again and just make it real clear that that's why I can't support this.
Thank you, Peter. Other members of the council want to speak on this item or deliberate? Or Bruce, would you like to?
Well, I appreciate that concern, Peter, and I share it. In an ideal world, we wouldn't have this conundrum that we're in. But the reason that I actually do support this and was one of the ones who brought it up was because we do find ourselves in the situation that we're in. We want, as a town, we've got lots of support to continue to think this through carefully and to get it right as far as the overall policy in the town. And we do have quite a bit of history with this one group and this one location. And so that's how I see it, not so much as we're playing favorites, but that we have that history. That's a known thing. This is just for the public, to everybody who's listening, to be very clear. We're talking about delivery only of adult use. We're not talking about a storefront at this time. There's a storefront there for medicinal, but this is only adding the ability to do delivery of adult use. And deliveries are coming into town from elsewhere already. So for that reason, it seems like a fairly straightforward step to take, and that's how I see it. It's unfortunate that it also is favoring a particular business, but when Good Earth opened in town, we had to do things in order to make that work, and these things happen in a small town. Every business in town is a fairly unique business, but anyway, I do support the.
Thank you, Bruce, for your comments. Go ahead, Renee.
Yeah, I think I'll just make a comment before someone makes a motion, and that is to say that every day I hear a story of how medicinal marijuana is saving lives. More and more and more. They're now making CBD creams in plastic bottles. It's that common, which really is upsetting. And if you do this, you should make it in glass. But it really is such an important and so little understood medicine. My hesitancy around any of this, because I honor this field of medicine that I don't know much about so much, is that with the recreational legalization, we're losing sight of what's possible to do with the medicine, in my mind. So when I think of Lynette and MMA and the intention and what she's brought to this practice that she's had, I don't want to lose that. So I am hoping that that the recreational element in this is to enable the medicinal part to survive. So I'm hoping that it will stay in that vein and that you will stay true to that vision. And I'm also just wanting to say for the record that it doesn't sit right with me to say that some of what it is that's going on with marijuana and cannabis product now is completely safe and that no one's ever died from it. Now, I don't mean the purity of the plant. I mean what's happening with THC levels. I mean what's happening with edibles and infusions and some of the things that kids are getting a hold of. They are whacked out. And so I just have to say that before moving forward with this, that I feel very strongly that we all look together at some of the realities of what's going on with some of this product today, and that we look at that as we go forward in the next couple of items on the agenda. But I also want to thank you for being so true to that medicinal spirit of this, and we have to know more. We have to continue to learn, because I'm stunned every day at how much people rely on this for getting them through things that are just too painful to get through without a good, healthy medicine. So,
Thank you,
thoughts.
Renee. John, did you want to deliberate on this item?
Yeah, I guess I think Renee just spoke very well to it. I mean, and basically what we have is a local Fairfax business that has helped hundreds, thousands of people. It's the one licensed, brick and mortar medicinal place in the county. I think it was the first in.
Okay, so we'd like to have a report on the parkade design process and consider options for approving the bid award or considering the bid award for the project. And just to be clear, there was a little typo on our reports that said November 7th, and I believe it is December 5th. So,
Duly noted.
thank you. So with that, Town Manager Toy, I guess we won't ever be touching that microphone again.
That's what the town clerk said. So I'm sitting over here, so it's easier just to go through the PowerPoint, and then I can use the laser pointer. But what I thought I would do is get the slide to move. Oh, wait. Oh, need to turn it on. There we go.
I want to mention while you're doing that there was a supplemental report that came out, and so it's on the whatever that is out there in the lobby.
It's the Old Town Safe.
It's on the Old Town Safe in the lobby. There's the supplemental report. Okay, so with that, Town Manager Toy.
So this is obviously what we refer to as the parkade. It's downtown. Here's Broadway. Here's Sir Francis Drake. These materials are actually in the staff report. Pacheco, Klaus is over here. And it's hard to tell on this, but what's overlaid over the top is a survey done. The survey indicated there's about 74 parking spaces of various sizes. Not all even meet compact standards, but that's just what it is right now. And so what I thought would be helpful is this is actually the original concept plan for the parkade back in 2010 when you put it together to apply for a grant. At that time, the concept was sidewalks around the parkade, ADA standards, bicycle improvements, a bike lane, crosswalk improvements, and so on related to the project. Now remember, that was back in 2010. So you move forward a few years, and actually in 2017, the council had several meetings to discuss the parkade concept. And in 2018, you actually approved the concept, which does not have sidewalk all the way around, does not have a bike lane, but does curb ramp improvements to improve ADA, redoes the ramp, takes a look at repaving the lot, and reconstructs the stairs to make them safer for pedestrians. So that was the concept plan approved in 2018.
And I believe our focus was ADA accessibility was our primary focus at that time.
Sure, and it still is. So in November, at your last meeting, you authorized staff to go ahead and retain an engineering firm, that basically is a civil engineering firm, to help further refine this concept. So I think what I'm hearing, just to, in essence, I thought it'd be good to summarize. In essence, what the town is doing is really you're repairing the existing parkade with ADA improvements and making some improvements for pedestrian savings and repaving the lot. You're doing it all, in essence, in the same footprint. So you're not adding anything, you're not impacting parking off-site, and you're not impacting any traffic circulation. And so what we'll do is we'll go to the next slide, which shows, this slide is, oh, okay. So this one, maybe we'll go to the next one that talks about what improvements we're talking about, and then I can come back to this, or the line drawing to show you where it's at. So what we've done in this plan is the engineers have further refined it, and actually some of the drawings on this, because this is a work in progress, that's kind of a new site plan that they came up with, trying to document some of the further things they're taking a look at. But in essence, they're trying to expand all the tree well sizes from an average of 4 feet to 6 feet. So pretty much, it won't be a box, but trying to make it 6 feet around the tree as opposed to 4 by 4 by 4. So that's what they're trying to do. The concept there is to open it up more, actually lets more water flow in. It's probably better for the tree. Back in 2013, Urban Forestry Associates actually prepared an arborist report. In that report, it actually suggested the removal of 2 trees to benefit other trees. And it actually had the removal of another tree, but it turns out that tree it's proposing to be removed, and we'll get over that. Well, I'll show you where on the site plan, is actually one of the 2 trees we're recommending be removed in order to accommodate the reconstruction of the stairs. So all told, 2 trees need to be removed to accommodate the reconstruction of the stairs. The other trees are suggested to be removed to accommodate the benefit other trees. However, that doesn't mean you need to do that. That's just what the arborist report said. And we're currently working with Ray Moritz to try to update the report, get his feedback on how he thinks this will all work.
And those other 2 trees were to benefit the redwoods, correct?
Yeah, redwoods and then redwoods and some other trees. I think the report just referred to other trees. And then I'll show you on the site plan when we get to that. The driveway approach to the parkade and Sir Francis Drake will need to be reconstructed. What we're proposing is we remove the existing bus shelter in the parkade, and then we leave a 10-foot concrete pad with, if there's power there, then we would have power to it. And the thought pattern would be at one of the meetings, the community indicated maybe this could be some type of community event where you use local contractors to build the same thing. So we'd have a place to do that, but that's something we could do at a later date. ADA spaces actually have been moved from the previous concept plan to really better accommodate path of travel and to maintain a 15-foot aisle space between parking spaces. And actually, we only need 3. Originally, we thought we needed 4, but it's 3 spaces, 1 fan accessible, and then 2 other ADA spaces. So what's going to happen is right now, the current count is 74 spaces. They're not all standard, they're not all compact, some are even substandard. But what we'll have is a total of 71, which includes the ADA, some compact spaces, and then standard spaces. And standards we're just using the county and Marin standards.
However, the plans you gave us say 75.
Right, that's because this is updated. So
okay.
We went back, did count, literally this week, went back and confirmed spaces, confirmed the amount of parking spaces that this plan would ultimately have, and that's the newest number is 71.
Do we have to specify if there's, if we're wanting electric charging specific spaces? Or would they just count in the general number and we would allocate as many as we could get funding to put in stations?
Yes, they're just counting the general number.
Okay.
One of the things is up the stairs, you may notice right above the stairs there's bollards. We'll actually have to take those bollards out and replace them with other bollards closer to the staircase. For the mid-block crossing at Siam Lotus, there's some options we could talk to the council about, because you could slightly extend the ADA curb ramp slightly into the street. It doesn't impact traffic or parking. Probably creates a better environment for pedestrians, creates a little more safety, but we could show you how that would work, and it's a little different than what's shown on the plans. And then one of the things we'll touch on is the engineer is working on designs locations for bioswales to treat stormwater runoff without losing any parking spaces, and then we'll just identify a couple of those locations. Yeah, excuse me, and then due to the timing of the plans, we're actually not recommending inclusion in any flashing beacon systems right now or a bus shelter on Broadway. You can always come back in and do that. I think if you do it now, it kind of adds a little more complexity to the plans and specs, given that our game plan is to try to get something out by December 17th.
So if the steps are engineered and then that ADA ramp goes out just a little bit, will that accommodate a future flashing beacon?
Yeah, there's no problem to accommodate a flashing beacon. It'd be pretty straightforward. So this is, So this is a line drawing as opposed to the aerial. Maybe it's easier to see, but this is cloths. So what we're proposing are curb ramp for ADA purposes on this side and replacing the sidewalk between the curb ramps. Most of that is related to, is by the time you do the curb ramp, by the time you get the sloping right, you're gonna come in and you're just gonna have a little piece of sidewalk left, so you might as well replace everything. We also talked about gonna do a curb ramp there at Bolinas and Broadway, and there's right there for the parkade, and then we are also gonna do the corner of Bolinas right there in front of the coffee roastery, and then curb ramp here at the entrance where Taylor intersects the parkade. This would be curb ramp, and there'd be a curb ramp at the corner across the street. At the mid-block crossing by Siam Lotus, we're talking about curb ramp right there off the steps. And on this side, this was a different design about, well, should we make it bigger? What we're back to is just a curb ramp right there that's right next to the driveway. Now, one of the things available to the council, and we could show more pictures on that, is you could have this curb ramp bump out a little bit into the street on both sides. Because right now, there's a parking space here, it doesn't impede flow of traffic at all. On neither side it doesn't impact traffic circulation or parking. Creates a little safer environment for pedestrians to stand while they're waiting to cross the street. So
just one question. So I'm not sure I'm remembering this correctly, but there is stairs across from the theater, and I think we were rebuilding those stairs as well.
Correct. Oh, that's correct. Forgot about that. You're correct. In fact, I forgot a couple other things. Let's go over that too while we're doing that. Let's see. Yes. So here's the theater steps. So we're redoing the steps right here. As requested, the connection that hits Taylor into the parkade, we're going to do some type of path. It could be like similar to Lansdale, where there's some type of painted stencil paint or stamped asphalt or something that would bring that connection from Taylor to the mid-block crossing here. Over here are the ADA spaces, the 3 spaces. This is kind of a striped area. We're still working on that, but in essence, that's the path of travel for the people in the van access or just ADA access to come, and they would then, we have to rebuild the ADA ramp, which is right here. Now, some of the things that I forgot to mention when I talked about the issue of stormwater treatment, bioswales, aerials we're actually looking at is right off the steps, right here's a parking space, and there's an area right in here that could possibly be used, because I believe there's a storm drain right there that could possibly be used to treat it before it goes into storm drain. We are looking at another area that is right here, and actually what that is, and we can look at Google Maps, but It's right off Pacheco and Broadway, and this is red, but there's a storm drain right here, and there's actually an outlet right in the curb that flows down that sloped area right into this area. And so we're looking at, could that be a possible way to treat the storm water before it goes into the storm drain? A lot of that is we need to figure out how the storm drain is laid out, figure out what's the best way to do it. Now, one of the other things not shown on this map is that these angles here are the wider tree wells. On the parallel spaces, the tree wells will stay roughly the same, but they're a little wider, and what we're looking at, depending where the storm drain is, that maybe it's a possibility of the space between where the car wheels hit and the curb, that it may be possible to open that up and not asphalt it and open it up and create kind of a larger area. Now, you know, could be maybe do compact cars there instead of regular sized cars. So those are different things we're looking at as we go through the process.
So Garrett, while you're on the storm and water retention, if you're looking at the stairs, on the left-hand side right now is the rotating art installation. On the right-hand side is a tree, like a planter kind of thing. And it's cut in such a way that when Warren and John and I looked at it, that it's naturally sloped for water retention there and a planting. Is that contemplated in here?
Well, I
Because
think
that was a really good sink opportunity.
Well, I think what you have to decide is where the rotating art exhibit is, do you still want that to be a rotating art exhibit location, or do you rather have a tree there? Now, my understanding is the previous trees just never survived at that location for whatever reasons. But more importantly, the question is, do you want to have a tree there that matches the tree over here, or to keep it as a rotating art exhibit?
But those are two different discussions. I would say what I'm trying to figure out is on the other side where there is a tree, or
Isn't that where the mimosa tree is? Is that
it?
the mimosa? I think it is.
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
that would, right, so that needs to be a place that is looked at as a sink for the water.
Okay, I mean, we could look at that. I mean, it's a
Or
work in
both
progress.
sides theoretically is what we looked at with Warren.
Yeah, very much so. And then, you know, there was a lot of individual trees that would each get water from the runoff from the lot, the way we looked at it with Lauren. And, yeah, it's quite promising, actually.
Okay, so we
Yeah, I wanted to, I was curious about that, because like John says, it looks like there's a lot of opportunity to divert water to those trees, which is good for the trees, but it's also a good way to sink all that water. And in terms of the plans, have there been an effort to look at enhancing that possibility of diverting the water to the trees?
Actually, what we looked at was widening the tree wells, because the storm water basically runs along the curb line. That's what we think, and so it would go to the trees. I mean, that's the thought pattern. They would
Yeah.
get more water because there's more, it's a wider tree well. In some cases, some of the trees, the asphalt's just paved right up to the tree, so that obviously would open it up.
Yeah, but that does underline what we talked about with Warren, is that the way it's laid out, most of the trees, you know, basically you just have to open up the asphalt around the roots, and they will be naturally served by the runoff on that. There's a few, what Renee was referring to as specific cuts that we need to do in the curb, for instance, around the mimosa tree, that will enable that to be watered by runoff, but currently it's blocked off. Might be a factor in the tree that keeps on dying.
And there's even the one that's under the present art installation under that platform, that foundation, there's actually a drainage. So I just want to make sure that we make sure those places are called out. They were drawn up. We had each one drawn up.
So the engineer did look at whatever Warren prepared, but I could ask him about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Both
it's
sides.
important not to have that lost in the process, because we do, in fact, need to rapidly move this forward.
Sure.
So
Okay,
I'm all
so-
in favor of that.
Let's make sure we include that.
'Kay.
Okay, so go ahead, Garrett.
Okay, so this is the mid-block crossing from Siam Lotus. And over here, you could see a crosswalk goes this way, and then right over here is where the curb ramp would be. One possibility is that curb ramp would come out a little bit, and we'll come out a little bit. It would just be, there's no parking there, so it'd be the equivalent of being where no cars go.
So let's go ahead and do that, because we want to increase the ADA accessibility across the street
Okay.
as well. As long as we're not losing parking, it's not impacting the flow of traffic.
Okay,
Is there a
that was
problem
a
with that?
question. No, there's just a question to council if you want us to do that. But you could, at the end, you could let me know.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We all say yes.
Yeah.
Did you write that down? Okay, all right.
Michelle's
So-
writing down yes.
So similarly, it's the same thing. Across the street from Siam Lotus, you could actually put this out a little bit into the street, like 4 feet. This is a staircase. Actually, when they do the reconstruction, this is the tree that has to come out right here. And actually, if you look at this from street view, it's a little undersized compared to the other trees. But what happens is the staircase needs to start further back, and then the landing right here. And then what you could do for a curb ramp, again, you could have it come out a little bit, and actually it doesn't impact parking or circulation.
I think we would all echo the same thing. Why not? As long
Okay.
as we're not impacting the flow of traffic and we're not impacting parking, that's part of what our goal were, to make things more accessible.
Okay. And then this is example of, we talked about, this is the east side of the lot, and this is Broadway. Here's the storm drain. I think there's a storm drain inlet over here. And there's actually a curb cut, there's a little drainage outlet in the curb right here that flows down. And what we're talking about is something in the street that could be used to treat the stormwater before it goes into the storm drain. Need to figure that out, but it wouldn't impact traffic or parking. There's no parking. And actually, when people make that turn, they're obviously the path to travel, the lane's right here, not over here. So it doesn't impact any pedestrians. Pedestrians go this way. So that's one of the areas that we're looking at.
Okay,
My
that
only
sounds
comment
good.
on that would be that the sight lines for that traffic and that crosswalk there, it's good to pay attention to.
I don't think we're proposing any trees in that space. It's just strictly treatment of stormwater before it goes into storm drain.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Garrett, quick question on
Oh.
curb cuts. Is there, I can't remember, is there an existing curb cut in front of Grillies so that you can cross Molina's
No,
Road
I don't
there?
think there's any ADA there.
There's not.
I don't think so. I don't believe so.
It seems
But
like
it's,
we really should
Okay,
put that
so-
there to make the entire downtown ADA accessible.
Okay, we could look at that. I don't know if the storm drain's in the way and how that would work, but we
I
could look
think
at that.
there is a ramp there.
Is it? I can't remember. If it's not, we really should have that.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I think where it's lacking is over in the corner cafe.
On the, in front of the
There
coffee
is an
roasters.
existing cut there.
There
I mean,
is,
It
okay.
doesn't bulb out, but there is a cut there. Yeah,
Okay.
that
Well,
goes.
maybe there is, but it probably doesn't meet, well, we could look at it if you wanted to meet standards. So one of the things I wanted to touch on are the trees. And so we had talked about, these are staircases, so a tree here, a tree here. This tree right here in the arborist report was recommending to be removed and replaced, so we're actually just removing it. And the other tree was in here, and one was in here. Those are general locations of those 4 trees. At this point, our game plan is to save all the other trees.
So for the ones that are to, I guess, assist the other trees, I don't understand, what is it assisting, or what is it doing to not impact the other trees? I mean, redwoods, at least on the end where the redwoods are, redwoods do a really good job of keeping things away from them. They have allelopathic chemicals that prevent a lot of undergrowth. So remember, I'm a biologist. And so I would just say, in Ray's report, I didn't see anything that really explained that rationale. I don't know about the trees on the other side, because I don't think those are redwoods, but if we can preserve those other 2 trees, why not? And the 2 that need to come out for the stairway, I think at least one of those is liquid amber, which is an undesirable species. But I think our goal was to preserve as many trees as possible, and the stairways are a different story, but is that something we can?
You can do, I mean, I'll talk to Ray, but pretty much he was saying you can do it. It would be beneficial, but you don't have to do it.
And is it something that the trees grow better when there's another tree taken out, or I guess I don't
That's
understand.
his thing. In essence,
You
my
don't know.
words, not his, is yes, it's beneficial to the other tree because that tree is not taking whatever from that tree.
But I guess I feel like those trees on either side have been
Okay.
there a long time and they don't appear to be floundering.
So I will ask the arborist, I go, is it a big deal? Can we just leave these trees here? What's
Unless
the
there's
downside?
I guess in my opinion, I'm just one person, unless there's some overriding problem, then I think we should keep them.
Okay.
Can you use the laser and point at which trees? The ones near the
The one
redwoods?
on either end.
There's one in here and there's one in here. I can't detail it more than that because I just can't make this bigger. If I could, then your map, actually, the arborist report has a tree number.
Right.
This map in your packet has tree numbers on it, and it would point to you which trees,
Yeah.
what exact
Well,
tree it
let's
is.
just ask Ray what his
Yeah, so
reasoning
we'll ask
is.
Ray. We just,
Yeah.
he hasn't gotten back to us yet, but.
That's what I would think, yeah. Let's see what Ray thinks,
Okay.
because
So I think.
he's pretty good.
So I think those are all the changes that we were proposing as we further refine this plan. And then the next item that's in the staff report is the issue is the deadline set to award a contract is December 31st, 2018. We have requested extension. The MTC staff and the Caltrans staff support it, but it goes to the California Transportation Commission, or CTC, for approval. What we have indicated to them is we believe in some preliminary contacts with contractors that due to the local bidding environment and the holidays, we're really not going to get any competitive bids, if at all. In fact, one of the contractors we talked to that's a fairly large contractor that bids on our projects all the time is actually closed. So he goes, no, we're not submitting anything, we're closed. So you have that issue to think about. But that being said, if you did hold a special meeting on December 31st, what would happen is it would be something like this. We'd have bid opening at 11 o'clock, have a council meeting scheduled at 1, and if the bids came in really high, I could have authority just to cancel the meeting, or you could have the meeting, but I would say just continue it because you're not going to award any bids. But what it does, it would demonstrate to the CTC, because CTC doesn't decide until late January. They don't meet till like January 30th, 31st, that, hey, we tried, we got bids, whatever, 30% higher than the engineer's estimate, no bids, one bid, not good, so we need the extension. Like I said, their staff, MTC and Caltrans staff is supported. One of your other options.
Wait a minute, you said MTC and Caltrans. That's not Caltrans. You said MTC is.
And Caltrans. I have to go through both agencies.
So who is CTC?
CTC is the California Transportation Commission, and they're the ones that actually approve this funding source.
And so if.
So the funding source is different than the OBAG grant back in 2012. This is a completely different source. It's State Transportation Improvement Program funding, and that gets awarded by CTC. MTC has to sign off on your applications as well as Caltrans, and so that's who I've been working
And
with.
so they're supporting an extension, but part of the problem is we won't know until February if they approved an extension, and if they said no, we would lose all the money, right?
That'd be correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It seems like, given all the efforts we're doing, their staff seems to think it's such a small amount other than principle and policy and setting precedents that we have a pretty good shot. One of the other options, and I tossed it out there, although I don't think it's necessarily it's a good option, is you could authorize staff to award a bid to lowest responsible bidder subject to some parameter, like the engineer's estimate, very preliminary, was $475,000 for construction. But we'll have a better estimate as we move through time. But what happens, you would pick some number, I'd be authorized. I actually don't think that's a good idea. You could hold a special meeting in the first week of January to award the bid. I have a question into Caltrans about whether or not Caltrans would deem that substantial compliance. So you may not have done it December 31st, but maybe you did it January 2nd. Is that deemed substantial compliance? Of course, if your bids are higher than you anticipated and you reject all of them, then you have the same problem. You still need to wait for the extension. The other thing is you could just, if Caltrans were to say, yeah, if you're No, the last, sorry, I got mixed up. The last item has to do with you're waiting for the extension, so you bid the project out in January and a bid award in February, because by then you would have heard from CTC what they're doing. That still wouldn't prevent the issue of, having to rebid the project, but if CTC grants extension, it'll be something between 4 and 12 months. So requested 12 months based on their staff recommendation.
But you also mentioned that you've already checked with one of the contractors that we typically would go out to bid, and they're not going to submit a bid. And is this one of the contractors that we've used in the past?
Right, they're one of the larger Marin County contractors. If you did it in January, I don't know, it wouldn't, they probably couldn't do it the first week because they're closed until the 2nd, so
Right.
you need to push it off for a little bit.
So you're basically pushing it off to the January meeting anyway.
Correct. We could issue the bid sometime in January. We would have the bid opening, whatever, make it up, sometime in the end of January, and then take it to the council in February, assuming it got extended and there was a low bid. If there's no low bid that you liked, that within budget, then we'd have to reject all bids and start all over.
Well, here's a question. Could we just, if we made the bid opening on the 31st or whatever it is, or the 29th, and we didn't receive any bids or any, if we just got one, it's not going to be a low bid. So, they hand you that envelope with, the high bid if nobody else is there, which is typical. Can we, at that point, just extend that bidding time?
No, you can cancel your meeting so you don't have to attend, but you can't expend the bid time. You'd have to rebid the project.
Yeah.
Typically what we do is, if you recall for Forest Avenue, we got the one really high bid, and then we value engineered it, came back to the council for direction.
So it was a
if that
different
okay.
project then.
Now, it could be what you may want to do is, because of the holidays, you may just want to rebid it as is in January, and maybe it's
just to get
it's due in
another shot
February,
at the same
because
bids,
the
yeah.
contractors are back, they're starting to plan their year schedule, and
Yeah.
hopefully you get more competitive bids.
Because frankly, I'm concerned with Caltrans because they're very, let's say it, a rule-based organization, and if we don't jump through all the hoops and try to be in compliance with them, I don't want to give them any, I want to get the best possible chance that they will fund this,
So-
I don't want to lose the funding.
So Garrett, is the idea to have the meeting to consider the bid before the end of the year so that we are, attempting to comply with the 2018 deadline?
That's correct.
And do you have any indications that would be persuasive for them? I'm willing to do it, but I just was wondering your thoughts on why that would be persuasive that we're timely if we don't end up getting a acceptable bid.
So staff has indicated when we put in our extension that we said, due to the holidays, local bidding environment, our preliminary discussions with contractors, we don't anticipate receiving any competitive bids. They thought that rationale was fine. Going this one step, though, would actually prove our rationale. And then what we would do is they would have a supplement, they would just add to their staff report that, hey, we moved ahead, we tried, and it happened exactly as we thought.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, that
probably
makes
worth
sense.
that extra effort just to belt and suspenders,
yeah,
in my opinion.
I'm not familiar with the CTC and how they act. It's good that we do have Caltrans support and MTC support, but they could just decide as a matter of, we don't want to set any precedent and let these people slide. And, we could just say, too bad they didn't do anything to comply with us. So I personally would, even though it may be a futile exercise, it may be a good idea to do that and at least establish a track record that, maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised. But I think establishing this track record, if we don't get competitive bids, or we only get one bid and it's crappy, or, that's not professional, that gives further evidence that we tried everything we could to meet their deadline. I'm sorry, I should have waited. Bruce, did you have some comments?
No, but I'm willing to meet on the 31st, preferably earlier in the day.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably worth doing that.
11 p.m., then afterwards a celebration at your house?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I'm going to be here, so you just need 3, right?
I think we only need 3, and just sounds like Bruce is here, I'm here, John's here.
I think
Peter,
I
you-
never have New Year's Eve plans, so no, I'll be here.
Okay.
I have a quick question on the bus shelter. It says it needs to be removed. Does that have to be removed for all the rest of the construction to happen? I'm just wondering if we can leave it in place as long as possible before it's torn down, because it could take a while to, rebuild it, and it's certainly used and necessary as, dilapidated as it currently is. I would like to just try to keep something in place as long as possible and be without a bus shelter for as little as possible.
I can talk.
I share that concern.
I could speak to the engineer. It could create some problems for the project construction-wise if it gets kind of in the way and equipment hits it, it's just going to fall over. But sure, I'll talk to him about that. I don't think their take on it is the shelter's not in very good condition and it should be rebuilt anyway. But I understand. Now,
Well,
there's a
it
scenario we
also
could keep a
just-
temporary one up.
Just also, it's good to think about that, and I think that's a good point, but also remember that we might need to pour a new pad. And so that's the other thing to make sure is they may say, yeah, it's okay, but then we're stuck later pouring a new pad, which could be pretty costly. So think about both of those things.
Yeah,
I
and
agree
maybe-
if we can keep it up, that's a great idea.
Yeah, and maybe, like you say, Garrett, put up some kind of a temporary thing as soon as possible. Like maybe if we have to replace the pad, then, as soon as the pad is ready and not in the way of, equipment. Just have some kind of temporary shelter in place.
Yeah,
So-
they're not great, but I mean, they're even one of those pop-ups, because it's going to be raining, hopefully, this whole
So
time.
I'm wondering if I could open this up to public comment? Is that all right? Would members, Mallory or Frank, would you like to speak on this item? Or Richard? I see people standing up.
Frank Ager, 13 Meadoway in Fairfax here. The staff report and then the supplemental report issued today include 3 different dollar amounts. It was $630,000 in the initial staff report, with a possibility of going to $813,000. And then tonight, the discussion is $475,000. I guess that's because less work's being done. I don't know how it got down.
No, Frank, just to clarify, because I asked the same question. So the $813,000 was if we did impermeable or permeable paving, which we decided not to do, so that's the wrong figure. The 630, so the 475 would be straight construction costs. That doesn't include design, it doesn't include the overseeing of the project, so that's what gets it up to the 630. So I asked the very same question you did.
Okay. So it would be 630 if it came in at 475. It'd be about
Well, it'd be,
630.
we're estimating that the additional costs for overseeing the project, et cetera, would add up to about 630.
Okay, thank you. From reading the supplemental staff report, the plans are still evolving. So the specific dollar amount may be changing on you. I'm not sure what that's going to end up. I should say this, that the town council should not delegate the bid award to the town manager. That needs to be done by the town council. The proposal removes the old shingle roof bus shelter. Earlier this year, a group of volunteers with the help of a contractor were looking at restoring the existing wooden bus shelter. I'm not sure what happened to that effort.
Well,
But-
so the
but-
staff report mentions that that could be done with the group of volunteers. They're still very interested.
Okay,
And so
if I
the-
may finish, please.
Okay.
Okay, but if the building's demolished, it can't be rebuilt, and we're going to end up with a plastic metal bus shelter because of the costs. I think, let me tell you this, 2 weeks is way too short a time to get competitive bids. I'm not sure who's going to be bidding on this project, over the holidays between Hanukkah and Christmas. It's going to be really tough getting competitive bids in 2 weeks. Now, 4 trees are proposed to be cut down for various reasons. The city of Mill Valley posts a large notice on every tree, city tree, what is proposed to be cut down in Mill Valley. And it gives the residents an opportunity to look at that tree, to look at the notice and see why it's being cut down. And I think Fairfax should be doing the same thing with its public trees and the public rights-of-way. The current concrete sidewalk from Sir Francis Drake to Broadway, from the signal there, happens to be the best piece of exposed aggregate sidewalk in town. There's no cracks in it, and there's no chips in it, and it's going to be all dug up. I see folks in mobile chairs traversing that all the time, and it seems that you should be able to keep that exposed aggregate sidewalk and just put ramps on both ends. While we're spending this large amount of money on downtown access and parkade improvements, now is the time to install some emergency evacuation route signs with arrows in the downtown area. Santa Rosa, Paradise, and even Fairfax have said we have evacuation routes. The fire service has said we have an evacuation route. Everybody knows what it is. And we've been told it's going to be posted on the city website. I don't know how many residents go to the city website to find the evacuation routes, or if there's a fire, are going to go to the city website, a town website, to look for the evacuation route. So obviously, we need to deal with those issues. We need real signs posted, and this may be an opportunity to put some on Broadway and Bolinas. I mean, Bolinas and Broadway. I'd say keep the pedestrian crossing flashers in. It's really difficult to see folks crossing Broadway at nighttime, especially if they have dark clothes on. And those pedestrian flashers should be included. Downtown Petaluma has it on North State Street, and it works really well, and we need to have it downtown here. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Richard,
Thanks,
would you
Frank.
like to speak on this item?
I would just echo that I'm a big fan of the flashers as well. Whenever I'm downtown and I'm driving, I basically come to a stop and I look really carefully. A lot of times people are right at the base of the steps, and it turns out they're just chatting or they're looking at their phone, and I'm like, it's hard to see. So I don't know, if I understand there's like a whole timing thing and there's concerns there. So if it can't come in the first round, at least keep an open mind about adding them for the future. And I'd like them at both locations. I mean, I know some people complain about flashes. I don't get it at all. It's just so much safer. We're right up the block. We have 2 of them, and they work great. So I'm pro that. Something that just occurred to me watching hearing the report tonight, I ride a scooter a lot. That's particularly in the good weather. That's how I get around town and all the local towns, and I try to use my car only when I have to get on a freeway or a bridge. To my knowledge, other than the 3 motorcycle spots on the backside of Good Earth, we don't have any motorcycle parking in all of Fairfax. So granted, I'm speaking from my own, and I was once parked in front of the tea house a couple of years ago, and I got my scooter knocked over, and it almost came totaled just from somebody not paying attention and backing into me. So I know there's going to be a limited amount of spaces, but maybe we could find a little room to get in 2 or 3 little slots for motorcycles and scooters and such like that. My real issue and why I wanted to hang around for this issue tonight is the parkade's beat up and it needs to be. There's nothing wrong with this plan and as far as making improvement. I'm not clear about where funding comes from. So I know there's this grant. I know we have to match it to some degree. Sounds like the engineers have given a pretty good estimate on what it's going to take. And so I'd like to know a little bit more about where those monies are coming from and what else they could be used for. Is there a better use? Is this the best use? And again, not to keep harping on the fire stuff, but I know, for instance, that I remember Larry mentioned about a year ago that the Marin Municipal Water District had cut down 12 rangers to 6 rangers, and it's just, we've got no people out in the Cascade Canyon or the LA Preserve doing any kind of mitigation to the fuel load. So to me, it's always just a question about if we're doing one thing, what aren't we doing, or, so I just raise that generally, and that's essentially my input. So, thank you.
Let's not. Thank you, Richard.
Mallory Gatham, Willow Avenue. We have that, the straight parking, is that parallel? What's the straight parking across from Wu Wei? Are we going to keep that? There's parking across from the movie theater? Is that going to stay?
We're not talking about changing any of the parking.
None of the parking? Okay. In terms of the bus depot, I absolutely do not want to see a plastic bus depot, except maybe for one of those teeny temporary ones. So I just want to go on record to say, please, let's do something, either keep the one we have, and I'll volunteer to help work on it, or get one that is wood, that feels and looks that way. In terms of the trees we're going to cut down, and I don't know if this is possible, can they be relocated? Can they be dug out and saved if they can't be where they're supposed to be? Because I would love to keep every tree that we have there. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you,
everything
Mallory.
else sounds really good to me.
Thank you, Mallory.
Okay.
Lynn?
Hi, Lynn Walsh, Dominga Avenue. I wanted to share just some thoughts. The proposed ramp and bulb out that goes into the street near the Siam Lotus, I think these are really great, these bulb outs. It's great to increase the protection of the pedestrians and in a sense, shorten the crosswalk and the exposure that people have. When construction does happen, if I can just advise you to mark them very clearly the day they get constructed, because cyclists will run into them. Because we had this experience on Miller Avenue, we had a number of bulb outs. Some of them only came out a foot or two, and we had a number of people just go right over their handlebars. They're just not thinking, and they build them in one day, and then they paint them the next day, and in that day you'll have a couple insurance claims coming your way. So just a little word of warning.
You're speaking of bicyclists?
Cyclists, yeah, they're in the bike lane and they're just cruising along, or there's no bike lane, but they're just cruising along on that side, and they will just kind of run right into these curbs that are sticking out into the street. Sometimes you don't know the day exactly they're getting built, so just keep an eye on that.
Orange cones or...
Well, construction people have issues with the cones, but just get some sort of, even just one of those giant, like, big, signs. That's what I advise. Then also, I just wanted to say I'm really glad to see that these proposed changes don't have any impact on parking or the flow of traffic. I think that's really great. I wanted to note that I work for Mill Valley, we do post notices on the trees, and I think it's a really good idea, especially really high visibility trees, and people have a really strong emotional connection to trees, and so it's really a good idea to get a notice. We also posted on our website, and I know you have a brand new, beautiful website, and we also post high visibility trees that need to be removed on Nextdoor, just to really explain to the public the concerns that we have with the trees, possible danger of limbs falling or trees falling on people or cars, and really outlining, trees are at the end of their life, or for whatever reason they're also being removed. So I just do recommend that because it's very helpful. And then just finally, you guys know that my mom lives here and she's 80 and she's disabled, and my eyes have really opened to how important infrastructure is for our disabled community and our senior community, that their lives really do shrink down because they don't feel safe when they can park or where they can park and how they can get even just down some stairs and into some shops. They just won't go places because that little path that you or I or anyone doesn't think about, oh yeah, I hop out of my car or hop out of my house and I jog down those steps and I jump into that shop. it's just really different for folks with mobility issues. So I just really want to thank you for these ADA upgrades. It really will expand an entire downtown area for people with disabilities, for the elderly, the new concrete, the new pavement, the reduction of the trip hazards. It really does create a welcoming and safe place for people to enjoy our downtown, and it really will benefit our community to have more people with a diverse background, diverse life histories, being able to share our downtown with us. So I just wanted to share that perspective.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Wendy.
Hi, I'm, as you know, excited that we're finally doing this, as this has been going on for a while now. I just wanted to remind people that I keep bringing back the whole concept of universal design when we talk about ADA access. It's not just for disabled people, it's for everybody. It's for people with strollers. Making something ADA accessible is not, it helps everybody in the end. So I just want to remind you about that. And as far as the trees, I think the main tree that stands out the most in that whole area is the mimosa tree. And it's not even just when you're right there, and when you're coming on down Bolinas towards downtown, that's what you see.
So that one is not proposed
No, I just
to be
wanted
removed.
to. I
love
understand
that tree myself.
No, I understand that, but what I was about to say was I noticed on the report out there that tree is projected to be like a 10 to 20 year. The mimosa trees are I'm sorry, I can't get words out.
The lifespan?
The lifespan is 10 to 20 years. So I'm curious, it didn't say on the report how old that mimosa tree is, so I'm just curious about that. I don't even know if you know the answer.
I think
I
Frank
don't.
might know the answer to that. Frank, do you
So
know how
just
long
curious.
that tree's been there? The mimosa?
We planted that when we did the steps at the parkade and the ADA ramp, probably in the 80s, in the mid-80s.
Okay, so it's,
We actually had two of them, and vandals pretty much cut up the other one, the matching one, the other box where the artwork is.
okay.
So it should have been two exactly the same.
All right, but we do, thank you, Frank. So
Anyway, I would assume that
well
tree is-
outlived its lifespan, thank
Yeah,
God.
no, but I would assume that tree is the one that's going to mean the most to most people in general. And I just want to reiterate around, I've been saying this from day one, that you make certain areas in the parkade accessible, but if you don't make the other side of the street accessible, then it's not accessible. So every single place where you make some kind of curb cut or a ramp or whatever you're doing, you need to make sure that every single, I know that you were addressing that in the report, but some of it was, do you want this, do you want this? To me, it shouldn't even be a question. If you're going to make one side accessible, you need to make the other side accessible. Otherwise, it's not accessible. And I'm curious about the steps, the little steps that go across Sir Francis Drake to the Indian place. When you were showing that photo, you were asking about making that part. I'm losing words. I'm sorry.
I'm not sure what steps are you talking about? The ones that go across the street?
Yeah.
To where Yeah Baby was?
No, the other ones on the other side.
The other side.
To Sir Francis Drake. Yeah, so there. So you were saying that you wanted to make that like a curb cut, but I just want to remind you that no one's going to be able to get down the steps accessibility-wise anyway. Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we're talking about the sidewalks and like all the spaces and just how you move around that whole area and across the street from there. And I know you were addressing that, but some of them were questions, and to me they shouldn't even be questions. Otherwise, why bother doing this?
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for adding your expertise. So you need to wrap it up?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all your help in starting this process with John and I and Mark Lockaby. So with that, I'm bringing it back bring it back to the council for either further deliberation or a motion. I think we probably need to, I think there was expression among members here, just to sum up, that while it's probably a lot of effort and may not result in responsible bidders, that we should probably at least make an attempt for the December 31st so that we can establish this track record, so we won't give CTC any reason to deny our extension, even though, you know, we realize that may not come to fruition. And then I believe in that option. It talks about if we don't get that, then we would recommend continuing the item to the next council meeting where we would have sufficient time. So we would be able to rebid it in that time?
No, you wouldn't be able to rebid it, but what I was indicating, what happens is, if you receive no bids, then you don't need to even meet because there's nothing to meet on.
Right.
If you receive one bid, ultimately what I would do is, if it far exceeds the engineer's estimate in our budget, then in January you'd have to reject all bids, and then we would rebid out the project.
So we would have to reject all bids, or could we reject the bids on the December 31st if we decided to have the meeting?
You could, but technically then we haven't done any due diligence on the proposal, although I suppose you could. But what I would say is I wouldn't even meet. I would just, in January, your regular meeting, we'd come back to you, give all the information, we'd have some updates on some other things, and
so then
let you
if we
just
did
reject all
that,
bids.
we would have, you would have the ability to rebid it in time for the February meeting?
Well, probably, I see what you're saying. If you wanted to do that, then I would say you need a special meeting the first week of January or the second week of January to reject all bids and give us some time to rebid. Because at a minimum, we have to bid it for 14 days, but the problem is we have to get it in the paper, which takes 2 or 3 days ahead of time, and then we need to
So let me
be able to
ask
award the
you
bid
your-
or open bids before the meeting.
So let me ask you your opinion. If we do this December 31st, and either we don't end up meeting because we don't get anything, or we get some ridiculous high bid, and January 16th, we would reject all bids if we get something like that, then do you think that would provide the groundwork for further substantiation to CTC? That's enough, and then we would have more time to bid the project so that, in essence, hopefully we could accept a bid. Maybe we end up with a special meeting in February so we could really start this work in the spring as soon as possible.
Sure. What happens is you reject the bids and you could bid it out, but you wouldn't award it until you knew what CTC did. But yeah,
Okay.
you would probably, under that timing, need a special meeting in February if you didn't want to wait till March if we got very competitive bids. If we didn't get competitive bids again, then we would come back and do some value engineering similar to
What we did
Forest Avenue.
before.
Mhm.
Okay. So let me ask, Howard, I mean, to me, that seems like the approach we should take, but I want to hear from council members the way you want to do this. John?
Yeah, I'm for just going, going through the motions of going out. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's somebody who's not on, that one company is going to be on vacation, but, there are a few others that might bid, and we'll see what we get. But I think it's important to keep that stake in the ground, to keep this, not give the CTC any reasoning to, say we're not doing due diligence to try to move this forward. Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't make sense to, at the December 31st meeting, to move ahead at that point, yeah, there's only 2 weeks between the January meeting and the February
Okay.
meeting. Yeah, I think
So
it's a
we
good
would-
approach. I support it.
So basically, we would try to meet on December 31st if that comes to nothing, we could reject bids on January 16th, instruct staff, we get some updates, instruct staff to rebid the project, potentially have a special meeting in February, potentially not, wait till March,
Yeah.
and during that time, hope that CTC grants our extension because we've made all these good faith efforts to
Yeah.
try to meet their deadline.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really predicated on the fact that it's a problem to reject the bids at the December 31st
Okay.
meeting. Because
makes
if there's not a disadvantage in doing that, why not just move forward and saying, well, okay, let's.
All right, well, that
you
makes
know.
sense. Bruce, did you have something to add?
No, I think that's, sounds like
Okay.
a plan is developing.
Yeah,
Peter, did you have something to add?
yeah, a question. At the December 31st meeting, could we, if we reject all bids or whatever,
Well, we can't reject at the December 31st.
well, if we met on December 31st, could we instruct you to rebid sometime in January? I mean, do we have to have I'd like to try to move the process along without having to have an additional meeting just to authorize staff to issue another bid if,
No, that would be at the January 16th
Yeah,
meeting.
you'd just be rejecting bids, and we would just tell you, usually, we'd say, would you like us to rebid it? That'd be our recommendation. But I see what you're saying. I'll talk to Janet to see if we get a bid without doing any analysis, and just if the price is too high, then if you wanted to meet and reject it. But the reality is, we wouldn't bid it out till later in January anyway, because town hall's closed. I was actually planning to be off the first week of January. I changed my plans to be here on December 31st. And so the earliest would be the following week. We could bid it out, and we wouldn't have the bid opening until, after we heard from the CTC. But that could be prior to your
and is
February
that,
meeting.
the other thing too, is that still too early in the year with holidays and so forth? Are contractors going to kind of still be
No, that's actually pretty good because they start planning their schedule. So the problem with contractors, the big ones, they bid, they plan their schedules, how to keep their crews busy, and then sometimes they'll go, well, okay, I'll put a bid in, but I'll make it really high because if you really want me to do it, I'm willing to do it for that price. And that's what happens. The contractor we talked to that's closed, my guess is those other large contractors, because they're all related somehow, are probably also going to be closed from pretty much Christmas to New Year's, in essence, is what they're kind of telling me. So I'd be really surprised if we got any bids that were even close to what we thought it should cost.
Okay, and then I just wanted to thank people's comments. I thought there were some really good suggestions. I would like to see, and this doesn't affect the bid, but I think it would be a good idea to tag whatever trees we are considering removing when, in plenty of time before we undergo that process, just so people know. It's a good idea to put in the evacuation signs. I don't think we necessarily need to do that as part of the contract, but I think that's a good idea, Frank. I would also like to see the flashers put in in the sidewalk too, but that might slow down the project and kind of eat into the budget. And it does have a lot of strings attached to it. I mean, I wish we could, we had that budget for other things too. I did like Richard's idea of considering motorcycle parking.
We're actually looking at that. So
Okay, and
there
that
might be a
does-
space for something like.
Yeah, and that's just a matter of like restriping. It's not going to add to the contract or slow it down. I don't know, maybe, again, not if it's going to slow things down, but also maybe look and see if there's a possibility of putting in a bike rack for more bicycle parking. I don't know if
There are bike
considered
racks. As part of the construction, we're going to remove them and then figure out where to put them back. So that would be part of what we would do. Now, it is conceivable those bike racks are so beat up, we might just ask for new ones, and then we could decide wherever to put them. We don't have to specify
Right, but we'll have
spot.
an allowance for bicycle racks.
Mhm.
Okay. And I appreciate Lynn's and Lynn's comments, especially about Because I went through that with my mother, my elderly mother, when she became immobile and needed a walker to get around. It's like all of a sudden, and your eyes open up, and sometimes it does take like a loved one or a family member. And Wendy, your comments about universal access are, yeah, they're definitely spot on, and you're right. It's like unless all of downtown is interconnected, none of it is connected in terms of for people that need mobile assistance devices. So anyways, those are my comments. Tag the trees, look into motorcycle parking. Those are some good suggestions going forward. I'm sorry?
We're not going to do the bus shelter initially. We want to see if we can leave it there in the meantime before the new one is built by our volunteers.
Yeah, and then the flashing lights will.
I think
we
the
all want
flashing
that,
lights can
but-
come later.
The flashing lights really, that's why I asked if the infrastructure as we change it absolutely makes it so that it can quickly accommodate flashing beacons. That's one of my major priorities, is that those go in there.
Okay, so I've closed the public comment, so let's not continue this part of the discussion, and
Okay.
let's move.
Well,
let's-
I can illuminate a little bit in terms of funding. I mean, the funding for this is specifically for pedestrian ADA access. The flashing lights come from a different pot of money, also through the Transportation Authority, which is where this money came through. And that's low-hanging fruit. That's something that we're all in support of, and the community is also. And I think that's quite gettable, the flashing lights. I'd like, Mayor, also to support the tree noticing thing that Peter brought up, but also I think with the bus shelter, we should, in our conversations with the engineer firm or whatever, see what the possibility is of just, if they're going to remove that shelter in the part in the process, I think it probably wouldn't be that hard to just pick it up and move it, and we can put it somewhere else just to preserve it rather than destroy it and throw it in a landfill or something like that. Because if there's going to be an effort by the community, I think there's parts of it that are rotten, but the parts of it are not. And I think, having that available.
In my experience doing that type of stuff, that's just going to create, where do we put it? What if it's destroyed? What if we have to saw cut it? What if it falls? It's just easier, you either keep it or you just rebuild it later to look the same. That'd just be the easiest thing to do. I've been through enough of these where it just sounds good, but later it just becomes just a nightmare, and you find out, oh, okay, I could save a couple pieces of it. It's probably not worth the effort.
So let's just see if possible, as Peter suggested, we can keep it as is for now. And did you have anything else, John?
That's it.
I guess, Barbara, you alluded to that if the pad is not in good shape,
Yeah.
that we don't want to be stuck with a concrete pad that then we have to drill out of there. So we should make sure that that's taken.
Right. So I think we already gave that direction, but that's a good point to bring that up. So with that, I don't think you need.
One other thought just came to my mind. I don't know if we would want to look at expanding more car charging stations, but it seems like it might make sense to at least put in conduit if we wanted to, say, expand from like the current 2 spaces.
They're actually pretty easy to install. And you can get grants for it. It wasn't a problem to install the ones we did.
So it's not going to be a thing of where we would save a lot of money by laying conduit.
No, I'll
and then
talk to the
paving.
engineer.
Okay.
I don't know if it makes that big of a
I think
difference.
one thing we have to remember is I think there's 2 or 3 there now, and we lose parking spaces when we have those. So when you consider that there's going to be 71 spaces, if there's 2 or 3 now, but I don't think we need to discuss this right now. So I'd like to move on because it's 11:20. And I would like to say, so I think we've discussed, you don't need a motion, that we'll plan on December 31st. And move forward in the direction that you've gotten. So thank you for that. It is 11:20. I just want to ask my fellow council members if we want to try to discuss. Yes. All right, I'm hearing yes, the maximum home size. All right. So I apologize to people who want to go to bed, but I guess we're going to soldier on. And so we are going to be talking about the maximum home size. And Ben Berto, I believe that's your topic. Would you do the staff report, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. It's getting late, so I will be brief. What we have before us, and I'm looking for my notes at the last minute. What we have before us is a recommendation from the Planning Commission concerning the consideration of the maximum house size that the Town Council directed the Planning Commission to consider at your April meeting. The Planning Commission did so at 5 meetings between then and tonight. There are some conclusions that came out of that discussion. The first one was that the Planning Commission was unable to reach a consensus regarding reducing the maximum house size. There were a number of issues and factors that went into the Commission's discussion about that. That included the fact that there were a number of properties that would be now considered legal nonconforming. Your staff report briefly describes the range of different properties that would be with structures on them that would be rendered nonconforming were the maximum house size be reduced by we described 500-foot increments starting at a reduction from the current 5,000 square feet down to 2,000 square feet. It's my understanding that your council previously had considered reduction down to the approximate 3,000 square foot size, which would result in at least 72 properties being rendered newly non-conforming. It's noted that those...
I just want to interrupt and say thank you, Garrett, for coming. I know you're very sick, and we appreciate you coming, and hopefully you haven't spread that illness around. So thanks for staying, and Ben, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's fine. He did certainly soldier through tonight. So other issues that were considered by the Planning Commission relating to that reduction are it wasn't clear what issues or priorities or problems a lower maximum house size could address or would address. That the town's current regulations and policies have done a very good job in restricting questions about overly large structures to date, that we have floor area ratios and design review requirements. Those of you who have sat on the Planning Commission and have sat through the detailed discussions of especially larger home designs know that it's a quite thorough process and usually results in reductions to make projects more consistent anytime you get into larger homes. Other approaches could also be equally as effective in controlling or limiting the potential impacts of large residences. For example, the County of Marin currently has basically enhanced energy saving requirements. In essence, the larger the structure that's proposed, the greater the energy savings. So as you get into, say, a 5,000 square foot house, it would have to have the energy consumption of a 2,000 square foot house. There are other similar provisions that could be applied to proposed large structures. For example, runoff, grading, visibility. All these could and indeed are typically in some ways applied to that review process that individual projects have to go through. It's noted that the town previously considered maximum house sizes in the past over a 2-year period, and that it arrived at the current 5,000 square foot maximum house size after those deliberations. There was a number of residents who showed up at the Planning Commission meeting where this was considered, and staff would certainly endeavor to contact residents who would be potentially affected by reduced maximum house size. Obviously, a consideration at 11:20 at night with probably not a single person who would be directly affected isn't going to get a full view of the public position on this. At one of the Planning Commission meetings where we did have kind of a more fleshed out size and did do a public notice, there were in excess of 50 people who showed up. So I would certainly recommend continuation if you were to seriously pursue this. There were a couple of areas where the Planning Commission did arrive at a consensus. The first is that up to 120 square foot accessory structure, and there would be some caveats to this, but up to that size structure would be exempted from any house limit. It's noted that Fairfax is a town of accessory structures, and they're very useful to have on your property. So the recommendation of the Planning Commission is you would allow one of those. It would have to be non-conditioned with a maximum height of 7 feet. So it would really truly function as a shed. Another note by the Planning Commission is there are currently provisions in the zoning ordinance, the particular location is cited in your staff report, where the town allows additional floor area for residences that contain green building technology. It's noted that this technology, or this additional floor area bonus, is no longer necessary as the state requirements for building permits have caught up to Fairfax's requirements. Fairfax was ahead of its time, but at this point, pretty much those requirements are already built into applicable building codes that any new construction would have to comply with. Those additional enhanced requirements could be included as a way to enhance the regulations when applied to larger structures, though. So in other words, they wouldn't be kept as a bonus, but merely if the size of the structure got larger, they would have to provide more and more of these green building requirements. Options are listed toward the end of the staff report, and they include the following: make no changes to the zoning ordinance for the reasons that were previously cited. Discourage residential construction of additions or new buildings above a certain total floor area, and various items are listed there, including what I've mentioned. Reduce the maximum residence or duplex size, but allow owners of property with structures that are now newly legally non-conforming because they exceed the maximum size to remodel, alter, or potentially expand such structures. One of the challenges with typical code language, and it's present in this, is that the intention is really to encourage or require conformance with requirements over a period of time. In this situation, because the town is taking people who had no idea that their structures would or could become non-conforming, it would be allow them consideration to improve their structures, and typically you need to have some allowance for additional square footage if you're going to do that. Another one would be to apply a lower maximum floor area, but apply it solely to new construction on undeveloped residentially zoned lots. And you would have to develop a list of such lots and keep track of who is subject to what requirements over time, because over time, as undeveloped lots do get developed, it will be very difficult to distinguish, oh, you're under an older system, and therefore you're allowed up to, say, the 5,000 square foot limit currently allowed, but you next door might only be allowed to build up to 3,000 square feet, or whatever maximum size the council decides. The last relates to retaining an outside professional assistance to explore the process of determining the best fit for Fairfax if reductions are truly desired. It's noted that the Planning Commission already held 5 hearings on this topic. It's likely that the council would be involved with numerous hearings, and that there's very limited staff resources and a number of higher, in staff's opinion, higher priority challenges before the council and staff, and that it would be prudent to obtain the outside services of somebody to assist in articulating options, conducting public outreach, including workshops, and developing options for consideration. So that's my report. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So do any council members have questions of staff? Let's just stay with questions.
No, thanks, Ben. I appreciate you kind of distilling all the different thoughts in a pretty concise report.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions for staff? I just want to point out that I asked some questions beforehand, and one of the things that was in a previous staff report that went to the Planning Commission was a comparison with allowable house size for other jurisdictions in Marin. And I will say that a good portion of them have no limit at all. Some of them go as high as 8,000 square feet. Mill Valley, Tiburon. San Anselmo has 5,000. Belvedere and Novato are a little around 4,800, 4,000, but they can get much larger sizes easily through design review. So just to add that, I thought that was important information. But with that, I'd like to open it up to the public to comment on this item. Mallory, would you like to speak on this item?
Yes. I always like to speak on this item. I do not think 3,000 square feet is a small house. I do not think that we have the same rules, the same population that the other towns in Marin has. I don't think we need to go compare to Tiburon, Belvedere, any of these places. We're Fairfax. We're different. We've always been different. I don't want to see anything bigger. I don't even want to see 3,000, but I'll settle. And I don't know, I'm not clear, Ben, what you were saying. Do we grandfather in 5,000 feet for non-conforming, or can we get rid of the whole idea about 5,000 square feet to rebuild, or there was something that was said about?
It's not part of the staff report. What he was saying is somebody has a legal non-conforming unit that you still allow them to be able to make alterations. So that's a separate item for the council to consider, things like that.
I want to see just across the board nothing bigger than 3,000 square feet that come into Fairfax, because if it's bigger, so many other things are going to be coming into Fairfax that I moved here to get away from. And I don't want to see that happening to this town when it's happening to this town. I don't want to see the taxes getting worse than they're getting. And I don't want to see way more cars and people who are going to be living in 5,000 square foot houses. Thanks.
Thank you, Mallory. Frank, would you like to speak on this topic?
Frank Hager again, Meadowway in Fairfax. So that current 5,000 square foot number was approved by the town council on a 3-2 vote. Caldaro and Ager were the no votes. We wanted to get that number down about 2,400 square feet and require a use permit for anything over 2,400 square feet with a maximum maybe 3,500. Most of the 42 homes that are now 3,500 square feet and over were probably built in the past 20 years. So there's a trend of building larger homes. Fairfax Hills, there's 6 and 7, 13 there. There's another one that's been approved up on top. There have been some large homes built in recent years. And size does matter when it comes to cost. I mean, you're going to pay more for a 5,000 square foot home than you're going to pay for a 3,500 square foot home. And when you see the numbers of, in the IJ, they give the averages of house sales in Fairfax, and you see these big numbers. Those large homes are driving up the average cost of a home in Fairfax. That's flat out, that's what they do. Anyway, I'd suggest setting a figure of 3,500 and requiring a use permit with very specific findings for anything between 3,500 and, say, 5,000 feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Did anyone else want to speak on this topic? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the council. It's for deliberation.
Sure.
So thanks for those comments. A few years ago, I heard about a study that was done, I believe, around Orange County area by a researcher here at UC Berkeley, who looked at a lot of different databases and was able to sort out what he was looking for was to confirm the sort of often assumed trend in house building that the newer houses are more efficient, just because they're newer, better technology, that they would be more energy efficient. And he found that they weren't. And it was kind of a surprising finding. And that was all adjusting for the number of people living in the houses, adjusting for the income level of the people in the houses and so forth. But he was just looking at trying to adjust for all those things. The larger houses were not more efficient in terms of, I wouldn't say more efficient, they were not using less energy. They were actually using more energy per square foot. So that was and of course, as any researcher would say, well, okay, we discovered this and now we need to do more study to figure out why it is. So we don't know why it is. He didn't know why. But the thing that it kind of, your mind goes to anyway, is that it's a matter of lifestyle, that people who are living in the larger houses are using more appliances, they're less frugal or whatever, and that's why they're using more energy, even though technically their house was built. I'm sorry, not larger houses. I got that whole thing wrong. It's newer houses. He was looking at the idea that newer houses would be more efficient, and that was not the case. But the point of all that was that the lifestyle of the people who live in the house makes quite a bit of difference, and how that relates in my fevered brain to the current discussion is that personally I feel like a larger building with more people in it, living in there are more people living there and they're living more communally, or as it were, that would be fine. But what I don't like to see, just as a personal preference, is a big house that is occupied by just a couple of people. It just seems crazy. And so that's kind of how I think about this, is that that's really what I would like to see us be able to not see so much of in Fairfax, is houses that are just excessively large but are maybe empty most of the day because people are working and there's only a couple of people living there, but it's a 5,000 square foot house just because there was enough money around to build the big thing. That to me is just out of character with the town. It's not so much just the house size, because it could be lived in a very different way. Otherwise, I would say that based on the staff report, the option number 2, as you list out the options here, of really trying to discourage without changing the zoning so that we have the legal non-conforming issue, but trying to discourage larger houses by putting more requirements for energy efficiency is one thing, but anything else that would just make it to where we really review them carefully. Because I think in general, they are out of character in the town. Big, huge houses in a town that's mostly much smaller houses.
Thank you, Bruce.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes, Peter.
So there's a number of reasons for this ordinance. It does, larger houses does change the character of Fairfax. It also affects affordability, as Frank alluded to. It pushes prices up. And house sizes increase because of market forces. Market forces don't build affordable housing, but as housing and land gets more valuable, there's upward pressure. And one reason why Fairfax isn't as built out as Mill Valley is because our land isn't as valuable because it's not as close to San Francisco. A trend that you see, and I saw this, I grew up for a large part of my life in Pacific Palisades, and there are a couple different neighborhoods in Pacific Palisades. Where I lived was mostly modest, relatively modest, 3-bedroom, 1,500 square foot homes, and that entire neighborhood has been torn down, and they're all 5,000 square foot, 2-story houses built out to the maximum of the setback. And those houses are worth, 5-6 times what prices are in Fairfax. The economic process was that as land becomes more valuable, home buyers have more money, move in, and they are a lot more likely to tear down and rebuild larger. And that is a trend that is, as housing prices go up, what we're looking at now is Fairfax is a lot more vulnerable to those kinds of pressures. So that's one real important reason why this ordinance should be, why I would like to see the maximum house size reduced. And we've also seen, I think, Barbara, you proved kind of my point when talking about other jurisdictions that have much larger houses. And there are portions of Mill Valley where the scale of the homes would be really imposing, and I don't think very welcome in Fairfax. So those are kind of the couple of reasons why I think it would be good to reduce our maximum size ordinance. In terms of energy efficiency, yes, the larger houses will use more energy. They cost more to build, et cetera. And I appreciate the time that was spent by the Planning Commission, and I wanted to just address a couple of things, some of the options. The second option of discouraging construction by establishing additional requirements for such structures, I don't think that's really workable, because I think what it'll happen is it will just become far more complicated to establish a whole other set of zoning requirements for houses above a certain size to, for example, require more energy efficiency or, more robust water capture requirements and so forth. And I understand the reasoning for that is like, well, can you mitigate the environmental impacts of the house? But it's not just environmental impacts, it's in economic impacts. But I think option 2 would needlessly complicate things. And then the other thing is, having served on the Planning Commission for 8 years, is that everyone would be coming in and asking for variances and relaxation of these things too. So you'd end up with big houses, and there'd be a lot of pressure to allow the homeowner to cut corners. And that would just eat up tons of staff time and Planning Commission time. So I don't think that that's really an option. And the other option option number 4, also related to that, the staff report also talks about, requiring houses to be more energy efficient really won't discourage house size, because building standards already have largely mandated energy efficiency about as much as we could ask for. The fourth option, to apply a lower maximum floor area limit only to new construction on undeveloped residentially zoned lots doesn't address the whole phenomenon of tearing down an existing house and rebuilding it to a much larger size. And it also would create a lot more complexity because you have to develop the list of undeveloped properties. And there aren't that many properties in town that would apply to anyway. So it would just really only limit it in a very limited percentage of the town. Option 5, I don't think we need to retain outside professional assistance to explore a process. I think we spent a lot of time on this. Option 1, make no changes to the zoning ordinance. I think we should bring it down. We have seen larger houses going up. And again, the economic environment is such that it favors more now than ever tear downs and rebuilds to a larger size. So option number 3 is kind of what we were talking about before, replace the overall maximum size cap, but allow owners of properties with structures that become legal non-conforming to remodel, alter, or potentially expand such structures. The downside of that is that they would be considered legal non-conforming, but that's not such a downside because those houses would actually be worth more because they could be allowable to rebuild up to the existing size that they are. So that would overcome any sort of downside of being considered legally non-conforming. And we could also put in our ordinance language that if they are legally non-conforming, they could rebuild to the size that they were at the time that such an ordinance was passed. And I think it would be reasonable to allow some percentage of expansion for a remodel. Maybe it's 10%, I don't know the exact number. But I think that would be fairly workable. I don't think it would create too much of a burden on staff. And the legal non-conforming issue, whether, having slightly different standards for existing versus new construction, that's true with any legal non-conforming kind of use. So I don't think it would be that burdensome to draft an ordinance like that or to enforce it. And I don't think it would be very burdensome on existing homeowners to go through a process if they were to remodel, or even if we could allow some kind of a reasonable expansion. In terms of the size limit, I appreciate the survey that's done here. I originally thought about 3,000 square feet would be appropriate, but given the kind of the survey of the properties, I would actually support it being slightly larger to 3,500 square feet. The reason being that would then reduce the number of legal non-conforming structures to be only about 42 structures, which is not very many. I think we have, Ben, how many structures do we have in town? Something like around 3,000?
No, I added up the number, there's 873 houses. If you look at the chart, you have a chart on here that says the size.
No, but that's only for
Larger.
larger than 2,000 square feet.
Yeah, there's a total of single-family residences and duplex, approximately 2,400.
2,400. So 42 out of 2,400 is about, I'm terrible at math.
2%.
2 or 3%. So I think that would be the sweet spot in terms of what we could enact without affecting too many homes. But I think it still would be a good protection to have. It's also a fairly generous size for people to build up to. I think that's the direction that I would like to see and what I would recommend.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to remind folks we're at 10 to 12, so if we can, to the extent feasible, not be as long-winded as possible so that we can get through this. And we may need to continue discussion, but we need to get rolling. So
I will be
Renee.
I will be very brief. First of all, thanks to the Planning Commission for really considering so many things and going straight to the options. To me, what feels like a way through this, and I appreciate Peter's point about how people are knocking down existing homes and building monsters. So what if we were to take number 4 and apply a lower maximum floor area limit only to new construction on undeveloped or previously developed residentially zoned lots? So meaning that they couldn't come in and knock down what was there, and then we put the limit only on that new development, on new properties.
I think one way to get that is to say apply to more than 50% remodels, because what people tend to do is
Right,
not tear
okay.
down the whole thing. They tear down part of it, so that's more
And
than.
then add to it.
So if that's where you're going, I think, I just want to add that, but sorry to interrupt you.
No, I appreciate that, because that's what I'm thinking. I look at how staff is stretched, and I also look at the 42 homes that we would need to, I would think, inform those 42 property owners that their place would now become legally non-conforming, but don't worry about it, you can still remodel. And opening up what that would take work-wise and staff time and administrative time and what we would accomplish by it, I would rather have a protection going forward that doesn't create legal nonconformity, but also protects from all the things that I think we're working to protect. So keeping it at, I mean, I'd like to say 3,000, but I'm, open to discussion about that, but to just do what's new.
Okay, thank you, Renee, for being so
Yeah.
succinct. And so,
And
John,
Mayor,
I will ask that you try to be as
I
succinct as
will
possible.
also do that as succinctly as possible also. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that drive this, and I think a lot of the points that you made, Peter, were accurate, and I think, Bruce, a lot of things that you brought up too, how you have a large house with just a couple of people in it is, I think that's really what's driving a lot of this. I mean, there's a property right now that's still being worked on where there were 2, and depending on how you look at it, actually 3 different structures, units on the property being used. And right now, the garage that was pretty marginal, but I think a few people may have been staying in it, is now being redeveloped as a, more of a luxury garage, and the 2 units are now just one, rather fancier house, is one of the things that drove, putting this back on the agenda. But I think that one of the things that was not, so there's a remedy in terms of cutting to the different options here. It may be a blending of 2 and 3. Basically, I think what our objectives is we really want to not have the tear downs of the existing houses replaced with much bigger things that, serve fewer people. I think, and maybe the number, maybe it is 3,500 is the sweet spot. We are, 3,500 is a pretty big house. I mean, it's I think it's 3 times the size of the house that I live in. And that has 3 small bedrooms. But the objectives of stopping the tear downs, I think we need to really think about maybe making an assumption if somebody is doing, splitting a house in a couple of pieces and making 2 units out of it instead of 1. I mean, this is the duplex thing. We need to make some allowances for that. That would be a state, a couple of 2,000 square foot houses, would be over the 3,500 thing. But I think that 2,000 is still pretty big for a house. that could make it work. Or if they're doing multiple units, or if there's a large house that's a group situation. I mean, I know in my neighborhood, my zoning area, it's legal to do a boarding house type of situation, and these are the types of things that could serve a lot of the people that are in need in our community, to have a more flexible thing where, you know, whether it's a group house or whether there's a lot of different forms it can take, but I think we need to look at the things that serve the people in our community, and I think large houses with just a couple people in it really change the character of Fairfax and do not serve the community. So that's about as much as I need. I think we probably have to continue this and come back to it.
Okay, well,
If I can quickly just amend what I said, I particularly agree with
okay, let's
the.
be very succinct.
Okay, it's going to be very quick. I particularly agree with what Peter said, that, so I at first said that I thought option 2 was maybe the only way to go, but that was kind of following the staff report.
Okay.
But I think if we're going to try to move forward with it, yeah, I agree. I would like to see a limit, and I think 3,500 is the sweet spot.
Okay,
if we can
so
figure out how
thank
to do
you,
it.
Bruce, for being succinct. And so I just want to add a couple things. So I looked at this chart talking about the sizes of houses that we have already. There's a couple things to remember, that the floor area ratio also limits the size of a house, because in order to get to 5,000 square feet, you need a minimum of 12,500 square foot FAR. So that's about a quarter acre. There's not a lot of those kind of lots in Fairfax if you look around. And we can see that I was looking at, I forgot about that there's much more structures below 2,000 square feet. But if you just look at between those that are equal to or greater than 3,000 square feet, which means they're less than 3,500 square feet, and equal to or greater than 2,000 square feet, that is 87% of those structures from 2,000 to 5,000. There's none at 5,000 square feet. There's 4 at 4,500 square feet. There's 4,000. I mean, there's 10 at 4,000 square feet, equal to or greater. And the real chunk of these are less than 3,500 square feet. So I personally would have preferred the idea of just adding some additional requirements, because we're not Mill Valley, which has an 8,000 square feet max. And I'm sure you can get around that as well with variances. And I don't see us having those kinds of problems here. So I personally would have preferred just staying with Michelle Rodriguez on the Planning Commission suggested higher energy efficiency standards. In fact, we haven't adopted the higher tiers, and you could require that. But I think what I heard from most of the council members is somewhere around 3,500. I think Renee was talking about 3,000, but potentially 3,500. I think I may have heard that from Frank saying something about 3,500 with a CUP above that. But I'm fine with the idea of looking at around 3,500 as a max. But I do feel this way, is we have a lot of things we have dumped on the Planning Commission, and they have a list as long as you're to both arms. So I don't think this is the highest priority we have in town, given what we're looking at in town as far as sizes of structures. So I think looking at how that fits in a realistic time frame, going back to them saying the council really gave direction roughly around 3,500 square feet with some of the additions that we're not going to go over again. And we can have this discussion again in January, but I don't want to repeat everything that we've already discussed. But I think one of the things that we're definitely missing is that I understand a lot of people came to the Planning Commission who had a lot of concerns about that limit. And so I think to the extent feasible, getting it in earlier for not repeating everything we've discussed here, because we tend to do that, we all tend to do that. Let's try to have a shortened discussion at the next meeting, January 16th, if it fits on the agenda, before we go back to the Planning Commission and give them more direction.
If I may, we don't need to send this back to the Planning Commission. It's fairly simple. We could, they've spent a lot of time, they've come up with some options. I would, again, be in favor of directing staff to come up with an ordinance to, with a 3,500 square foot cap. And there's not that much drafting that needs to be done. It wouldn't require going back to the Planning Commission.
Okay, well,
It's
we
something
can,
that we could, at this point, direct staff to come up with an ordinance. It would not require that much of a
Okay, well,
change to the ordinance.
as mayor, I'm going to say this. We can direct staff to come back, but we're not directing staff to come back in January. We're not necessarily directing staff to come back in February. There's a lot of things on staff plate. So to work with legal on drafting such an ordinance with 3,500, very simple, but we would like you to come back in a reasonable time frame, which doesn't mean expediting it for January. And if it doesn't work for February, let's aim for March. If we can do it
Sure.
sooner, that would be great.
I think that's a reasonable time frame.
So all we've agreed on, though, is 3,500. We haven't talked about legal nonconformity.
Okay,
We haven't talked about
we-
any. So
we-
I mean, we can't just send them to draft something in the next few months
Well,
without more direction.
Well, it's midnight.
I'm not saying we have to do it now. I would propose we continue this so that when we do send them, there's something to work with.
Okay,
I
well.
would, I would support that concept.
Okay, well, Ben, to the extent feasible, probably, I know the January meeting's adding up with a lot of things, so maybe towards the February meeting, come back with kind of taking what you've heard tonight, 3,500 is the maximum cap, and then throwing, maybe what we've done on cannabis, where you say, okay, here's an option, and get us to weigh in on that. So we're very targeted. Does that make sense?
Yes,
And
and the
I
direction's
think-
been very good.
Okay, and,
So
you know,
towards that end, a couple things. I would look at, what would be sort of a percentage to allow a possible, if there is a remodel of a legal non-conforming, by expanding the floor area by, 10%.
okay, so that is getting into the weeds. Let's,
Well, it's
Okay, we
it's
don't-
pretty
it's-
minor. And then
it's-
the other aspect would just be also, crafting language that would make it clear that if you did have a legal non-conforming, that you could rebuild to that size, to the size. That's all. And
Peter,
then,
the only thing is that we may be in disagreement here. So I don't want to send them doing something that we haven't come to some consensus about. It just takes their time. Because it's a bigger discussion about the legal nonconformity.
okay, so.
So let's wait.
So let's do this. Come back to us in February with the legal nonconforming and have us weigh in on each specific option. The idea of undeveloped land and 50%, greater than 50% remodel. Pull out some of these things that you've heard tonight and have us weigh in targeted so we don't do all this discussion all over again. So let's shoot for February. Does that make sense, Ben?
Yes, and there'll be plenty to discuss.
Okay, great. All right, but make sure you can get those options specific so that we can just say no, yes, whatever. Okay, thank you. And it is midnight. I would ask that we do our council reports very quickly. Or if everybody prefers, we cannot do our council reports. How do we feel
I
about?
could do mine amazingly fast.
Okay, well,
They're
let's
all
start
written
with
down.
you, Bruce.
Okay, so I attended a town hall in San Anselmo on the flood zone EIR, in which Jared Huffman and others spoke. That was pretty informative and well attended. Climate Action Committee meeting that we have every month on the second Tuesday of the month. Come on by. Mosquito and Vector District meeting up in Katati. The Marin Environmental Housing Collaborative Friendraiser, which was a very nice gathering and incredibly packed, but great people. The Disaster Preparedness Committee, subcommittee of the MCCMC met, and we did a tour of the Emergency Operations Center, which was quite the fabulous center. We're well prepared on that level. And that committee is working toward, actually both that committee and the other subcommittee that I'm on of MCCMC, the Pension Committee, are both working toward producing a report that can go back to the towns. So that's our goal. And then, of course, the MCCMC monthly meeting. That's it.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate the succinctness.
All right.
Brevity.
Okay. I can do even better. Anyway, the Paramedic Authority meeting was one of the ones I attended. And also the Transportation Authority of Marin was another one that I did, along with the Fire Board and the Volunteer Board and the MCCMC. And the other thing that I mentioned it during open time is that there is a shield on a a street light at the corner of Scenic and Sequoia. Right now, that's the prototype number 1. Probably that's going to inform, just the color that it looks at and how much it shields from the, going into the house windows around it versus on the street. That's one of the things we can look at it with that. I'd appreciate any kind of feedback people have, but basically going to make it shield a little less and probably not quite so amber in color.
Great. Well,
Okay.
thank you very much, and thanks for your hard work on that, and Bruce as well. Okay, Renee.
So yeah, we just saw the end of No Waste November. I made one mason jar, a large mason jar
You're
of
amazing.
landfill for the month, and so did lots of other people who took the challenge. Did tours of Marin Sanitary and Earth Care, the compost facility at Redwood Landfill. We did tours of the Fairfax Market for bulk buying, worked with the Good Earth. It was a really great educational month. I co-coordinated an evacuation drill, a mini evacuation drill in the Cascades, where we gave ourselves a half hour to get out of our house with everything that we could, our pets, our photos, our passports, and then we debriefed down at Doc Edgar, learned a lot. We're planning on doing multiples of those coming up, should anyone want to participate. I also attended the Marin Environmental Housing Collaborative Friendraiser, is that what it was called? And the MCCMC dinner, another Firewise Steering Committee meeting, and I spent the day learning about single-use plastics policy down in Foster City, also helping Drake High School setting up their compost systems. We're really supporting the interns that are working with us at Sustainable Fairfax and supporting them and working with their administration and making great headway.
Great, thank you. Peter.
Okay, thank you. Kind of a slow month. I attended the Climate Action Committee and Ross Valley Fire Board. I got sick, so I had to call off from the MCC
Yeah, we
meeting,
missed you.
so,
People were asking for you.
Yeah, I think I previewed Garrett's cold.
Oh, thank you.
It was a roaring hit. It kept me in bed for like 3 days. So.
Oh, no.
Anyways.
Well, all right. I attended the Marin Telecommunications Agency meeting, and one of the things we did was have Dane Jasper of Sonic do a short presentation on fiber networks, and the Community Media Center presented their annual report. I attended an Age-Friendly Fairfax committee meeting. I volunteered at Bennett House for their Thanksgiving celebration lunch that also had entertainment. I was one of the people who served all the folks there, and it was a great event. And they'll also be doing something after Christmas. So if any of you are around after Christmas, I'm going to volunteer there as well. And also attended the MCCMC dinner and meeting in Ross. And also saw Jackie Spear on the anniversary of Jonestown. And she was at Book Passage, which is pretty interesting. And also saw Gavin Newsom at Woodlands Market shopping. So with that, yes, I'm doing spottings in Marin. So with that, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Robin Racine Sweeney, who was the first female mayor of Sausalito and was on that council for something like 26 years. And she also lived in Fairfax her last years. And the other people I would like to adjourn in memory of is the 40th anniversary of the Jonestown Massacre, 918 people. So with that, I want to thank everyone and appreciate everybody doing their best tonight. Thank you.